Hello, very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. Coming up on the show today, heartbreaking tributes to their loved ones. The parents of two of the Southport victims described the moment they heard their little girls had been attacked.
And in sport, England score a last-minute try to beat France at Twickenham and reignite their hopes of winning the Six Nations.
It's Sunday, the 9th of February. Beautiful and happy, the parents of two of the Southport attack victims pay tribute to their daughters and speak out about their ordeal. Home at last, 5 Thai hostages reunite with their families in Bangkok after being held captive in Gaza for over a year. Also ahead, Health Minister Andrew Gwynn is sacked over offensive WhatsApp messages, including some said to be anti-Semitic. The parents at breaking point, spending thousands to find a school that meets their children's special educational needs.
We had to focus on what is it that we do to make sure that he has a future.
Harry and Meghan cheer on Team UK as they attend the opening ceremony of the Invictus Games in Canada.
And in the FA Cup, Chelsea's post-Christmas slump goes on as they crash out at Brighton, but Manchester City squeeze through at Leyton Orient.
Hello, very good morning. Thanks for joining us here today. The parents of two of the victims of the Southport murders have spoken publicly for the first time about the loss of their daughters. Speaking to the Sunday Times, the parents of Elsie Stankham and BB King described their daughters as caring, beautiful and happy. They were also critical over the sentencing of the girls' killer, Axel Rudab, saying it shouldn't have been televised. Well, Adele Robinson is here with us. And Adele, this is an extraordinarily moving read, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about it and what the parents said about that terrible day.
Yeah, it's really harrowing. It's heartbreaking to read, and but important for the parents of Elsie and BB to make sure that their daughters are remembered in the way that they want to. But in terms of what happened on the day, they go into it in some detail. Elsie's mum described getting a call from another mother whose daughter had been at this dance class saying that something had happened and that she needed to go. She said that she just ran, left the house wide open, got in her car, hands on the car horn all the way, running red lights. And then Elsie's father said that he'd fought to get inside the dance class, but the police just wouldn't let him. And then he said they both ran off in different directions looking for Elsie. And they said they described what they came across at that scene, saying that no human should ever have had to witness what they did that day. BB's mum said that the family had been preparing that day for a family wedding the day after, but it wasn't until her father went to pick her up from the dance class that they knew anything had happened. He saw ambulances, he was told what had happened. He didn't register at that point, he said, and he thought that maybe BB might be in one of the nearby houses where lots of other children had gathered. And he said that he was searching around the streets for her. And then he called BB's mother, who was in a shop, told her what had happened. She said she left, got in a taxi, and then she said she just ran, and eventually they described a police officer telling them what had happened and that BB had passed away, and BB's mother described falling to the floor and screaming. So, yeah, really hard to read, even more unimaginable for the parents to have to relive, effectively.
Absolutely. As you say, heartbreaking. And they also did raise some concerns over the nature of the sentencing.
Yeah, so neither family were in court for one of the initial appearances of a plea and directions hearing, I believe it was, and they weren't expecting the Southport killer to plead guilty, but he changed his plea at the last minute. They said they'd been braced for 4 weeks of harrowing evidence. In a quote from the article today, Elsie's parents said that there was a moment and a little bit of hope that none of it was going to come out. Then there was a phone call that night off the liaison officers saying, we need to tell you because it's all going to come out. And then they talk about the sentencing. There was a summary of the evidence of what exactly happened to their daughters. And they believe that the injury detail went far beyond what was necessary. BB's dad said that we know it has to be heard in court, but why did the whole nation need to see it on television?
And I found it really striking that they didn't mention the killer by name in this interview at all. It was all about, we want the girls to be at the centre of this. We want to tell people about their personalities and what lovely young children they were.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't mention him once by name. They called him the offender, the perpetrator, he. And, you know, they did. They paid beautiful tributes to their daughters. Elsie was described as confident, happy, one of a kind. Everything she did was pure enthusiasm, said her mum, that she was grateful for life, and also said how excited she was to go to that dance class that day. She wanted to show off her newly pierced ears. And then BB's parents said that she had an innate kindness, a kind of a spark, that she was hilarious, confident and full of life, and this is how they want them remembered.
Yeah, so moving. Adele, thanks very much indeed. 5 Thai nationals who were released by Hamas after spending more than a year in captivity in Gaza have landed back home in Bangkok. And a warning that the pictures you're about to see from the airport contain flash photography. Thai nationals made up the largest group of foreign hostages held captive by Hamas, and the 5 who returned home today are the second group to be released. They'd been working in Israel as agricultural labourers when they were taken. And there were emotional scenes as the freed hostages were reunited with their loved ones at the airport in Bangkok. Not long after their arrival, we heard from one of them, Ponsak Tana.
I would like to thank the Prime Minister, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Labour and relevant officers who helped us to be released. For today, that I get to be standing right here, it couldn't have happened if it wasn't because of every one of you who provided assistance. All of us here feel grateful and are so delighted to return to our motherland once again. We all thank you very much. I don't know what to say. Thank you very much.
Well, as the group left the airport, the father of one of those released expressed his joy at having his son back home.
In my life, I had a wife and sons. When my wife passed away and I heard no news about my son, I only had half of my life left. But when I knew that he would be released, although I lost my wife, I got my son back. I'm so glad, and I feel like I've got my full life back again.
Israel has sent a delegation to Qatar to discuss phase 2 of their ceasefire agreement with Hamas. This weekend, 3 more Israeli hostages were freed in exchange for 183 Palestinian prisoners. Back here, Sir Keir Starmer has said he's dismayed at the condition of Israeli hostage Eli Sharabi, whose Bristol-born wife and daughters were killed by militants in the October the 7th attacks. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, reports.
Hamas put up a stage in Deir al-Balah in the centre of Gaza for the 5th release of the hostages. These are propaganda moments for Hamas, an opportunity to show that they have not been defeated and still have some control in Gaza, and a message to President Trump that they have no intention of leaving. The hostages, looking thin and frail, were paraded on stage, carrying certificates and then interviewed by a Hamas fighter before they were released. Eli Sharabi said that he was looking forward to seeing his wife Leanne and 2 daughters again. He didn't know that all 3 of them had been killed on October the 7th. His brother Yossi was also taken hostage but died last year in Gaza.
All the way through this, we've wondered whether what's kept him going is the prospect of being reunited with Leanne and the girls. I know that the first question that he's going to ask as soon as he got into the Red Cross vehicle was going to be, if he doesn't know that they're dead, are Leanne and the girls waiting for me? And I think one of the distressing things for me to think about is that news, if it has to be broken to him, is going to be broken to him by a stranger in the back of a jeep on Gazan soil.
The 3 men appeared weak as they were transferred to the IDF. There is a real feeling of shock and anger in Israel and a new urgency to get all of the hostages home as quick as possible. Benjamin Netanyahu, spending the weekend in Washington, has reacted angrily and warned that there will be consequences without elaborating what.
The state of Israel views Hamas's repeated violations with great severity and the situation of the 3 abductees who were released this morning with great severity. We will not remain silent about this. A message has been passed on to the mediators and actions will be taken accordingly.
The 3 men have been reunited with their families. They're now being looked after at a hospital outside Tel Aviv. In exchange, 183 Palestinian prisoners were released from Israeli jails. Most of them were sent back to Gaza. 42 were taken into the West Bank. They emerged from the buses wearing the black and white Palestinian keffiyeh, making victory signs and into celebrating crowds. At least 1 elderly man had to be carried off the coach. 7 were taken to hospital for medical treatment. Israeli prison guards reportedly made them watch a video showing the destruction of Gaza before they were released. Both sides are accusing the other of unacceptable tactics. But we are almost halfway through the first phase of the ceasefire, and it still holds for now. Alistair Bungle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Health Minister Andrew Gwynn has been sacked over anti-Semitic comments reportedly made in a WhatsApp group. He's also accused of making a joke about one of his constituents, a pensioner, saying he hopes she died before the next election. Let's go to Westminster and bring in our political correspondent, Amanda Acas. Hi, Amanda. So tell us a little bit more about what he's accused of saying and what he said when he resigned.
Yes, this is a pretty shocking story from the Mail on Sunday. They are reporting that they've got hold of thousands of messages from a closed private WhatsApp group that was set up for a group of councillors in the Greater Manchester area, as well as local Labour Party officials and the MP, Andrew Gwynn, as well as reportedly at least one other MP as well. But what they've done is highlighted a number of comments that Mr Gwynn made in these groups, which pretty shocking reading against a number of different individuals and groups. So he talked about a 72-year-old woman who had contacted her local councillor to ask about bin collections and made the point she didn't vote for Labour. He said that he hoped she would have croaked, i.e. have died before the next council election. He also joked about a constituent being mown down by a truck. And then there are also allegations of anti-Semitism, racism, sexism as well. He made a comment about someone sounding too Jewish, too militaristic on the basis of their name, asking whether they were in the Israeli Special Forces Mossad. He also mocked the Labour MP Diane Abbott when she became the first black MP to stand at the dispatch box at PMQs, and also shared an offensive tweet about Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, and indeed a neighbouring MP for him up in Manchester. Now, it's fair to say that the Prime Minister responded very quickly when approached by the Mail on Sunday yesterday afternoon about this, effectively sacking Andrew Gwynn straight away. His party membership has also been suspended pending an investigation, which means he's also lost the whip in the House of Commons. A spokesperson for the government says that the PM's determined to uphold high standards and won't hesitate to take action against ministers who fail to meet those standards. Andrew Gwynn himself has also issued a statement saying, "I deeply regret my badly misjudged comments and apologise for any offence I've caused. I entirely understand the decisions the PM and the party have taken, and while very sad to have been suspended, will support them in any way I can." Now, the Tories have responded saying there's a clear contempt for pensioners in the Labour Party, but it's very embarrassing for Sir Keir Starmer on several levels. He's the third minister that the government have lost as a result of a scandalous story in the past 7 months since taking office, after Louise Haigh and Tulip Siddiq, and of course as well under pressure Sue Gray too. Just a sign of it's just a government really sort of under pressure. They're trying to get themselves back on track, and this is clearly very embarrassing. Also, a lot of anger. The Jewish Labour movement, for example, they have tweeted that they're appalled by this vile anti-Semitic, racist and discriminatory comments. Of course, the issue of anti-Semitism within the party, this kind of normalisation of these kind of comments that were being made, it seems, in this group, deeply sensitive for a party which spent many years tackling this, and Sir Keir Starmer indeed really hung his leadership on showing that the party had changed as a result of this. And indeed, Andrew Gwynn isn't a new unknown MP. He was elected 20 years ago. Originally, he was previously the National Campaign Coordinator under Jeremy Corbyn, really fighting the top of the party during those election campaigns. So deeply uncomfortable reading for the Labour Party this morning.
Indeed, Amanda, yes, thanks very much indeed. And this is no doubt one of the issues that will come up on Trevor Phillips' show shortly. He's going to be joined by the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, as well as Alex Burghardt, the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and the Bishop of London, Dame Sarah Mullally. So do join Trevor for his show, Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips, at 8:30 this morning. In the meantime, some of the day's other news now, and the remaining wreckage of both the Black Hawk helicopter and the passenger plane it collided with have been recovered from Washington's Potomac River. 67 people were killed when the military aircraft collided mid-air with the plane near to the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport last week. Investigators are now analysing the wreckage for marks to try to determine the angle of impact. Friends star David Schwimmer is calling for Kanye West to be banned from X over anti-Semitic comments. In an Instagram post, the actor called on the platform's owner, Elon Musk, to stop giving the rapper a megaphone. He added his sick hate speech results in real-life violence against Jews. In Mexico, at least 41 people have died in a bus accident. It's reported they were travelling between Cancun and Tabasco. The bus company Tours Acosta says it's working with authorities to find out what happened. Irish boxer John Cooney has died a week after suffering a brain injury in a championship fight. The 28-year-old was taken to intensive care after he lost to Welsh boxer Nathan Howells at the Ulster Hall last Saturday. Posting on social media this morning, his promoters confirmed he died in hospital, describing him as a much-loved son, brother and partner. Almost half of parents or guardians of children with disabilities have struggled to find a school that meets their children's needs. Disability charity Sense carried out the research and found that parents are struggling with a financial and mental health toll. Our education reporter, Anjum Pirbakos, has been speaking to a mother who spent thousands to get her son the right support.
That was his first kilt, and it was his first birthday. And it's the family tartan.
Tia, a mother who's had to give up her job and fight for years to secure the right education for her son.
My dream for him is for him to explore the world.
Yeah.
And I hope that language doesn't play a barrier.
Arun has a developmental language disorder, which affects 1 in 14 children.
We were completely broken hearing this news. But we had to channel our energies into ensuring his needs would be met. And we had to focus on what is it that we do to make sure that he has a future. It's my baby.
But many families say a lack of awareness of this disorder means vital support is missing.
At every step, there were hurdles, obstacles, challenges. It was really, really difficult right the way through. And so we had to invest in private support, private assessments to just reveal that, OK, he had this very serious language disorder, a disability that is lifelong and affects so many children.
It's not only families that are struggling. Special schools are experiencing the effects of a broken system.
Local authorities haven't had the power, in fact it's been illegal for them to open any kind of a school, let alone a special school. And I think they get a lot of unfair blame, really, and I'm hoping that that's something that the new schools bill will address.
Bridget Phillipson allocated £1 billion for SEND provision. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
Well, it will make a difference because mainstream school budgets are really struggling because the increases in funding for additional support for children with special needs hasn't kept pace with inflation or with our understanding of how those needs should be met.
Research shared exclusively with Sky News by the disability charity Sense found 45% of parents with disabled children have struggled to find a school that meets their child's needs. 38% said their child had to travel a long way to attend a school that met their needs. 45% of families also face problems with education healthcare plans. These are legal documents outlining additional support which will be provided.
The emotional impact cannot be underestimated. Many of these families are at breaking point. They're battling for support on every front: social care, education, health, and it shouldn't have to be that way.
TIA's local authority said they always work with families to try and resolve disputes despite stretched budgets and increasing demand. For TIA, another hurdle lies ahead: securing transport to school. And for many parents like TIA, the struggles seem endless. Anjum Pirbakos, Sky News.
Well, a Department for Education spokesperson said every child and young person deserves the best life chances, which is why we announced the significant £1 billion investment into the SEND system and a further £740 million for local authorities to create more specialist places where they're most needed. But in a system that's too skewed towards specialist provision and over-reliance on education healthcare plans, we know families are too often forced to fight to get the right support. We're determined to rebuild families' confidence in a system so many rely on. The reform the families are crying out for will take time, but with a greater focus on mainstream provision and more early intervention, we will deliver the change that's so desperately needed. Stay with us. We've got lots coming up for you here on The Breakfast Show, including the ghost brokers selling fake car insurance on social media. We speak to a young driver caught out after a crash. Also, we'll have another look at the Sunday papers with Lettis Bromowski and Jade Azim. Plus, find out what prestigious canine competition this dog is taking part in this week.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C.
Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British Home Children? Great to see you. Does your government owe them an apology?
The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power.
It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing.
As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse.
Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want them to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
The question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
The Premier League is exclusively on Peacock. Two of the league's biggest clubs find themselves at the wrong end of the table.
And the mood turns extremely sour.
Desperately chasing a win to turn their season around.
It's a beautiful finish.
Tottenham Hotspur.
To Eriksen. Back towards Amma.
Manchester United. This is the Premier League. February 16, only on Peacock.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
There are warnings. Skyrocketing car insurance premiums and the rising cost of living is leaving young drivers increasingly vulnerable to scams. Data obtained exclusively by Sky News reveals record numbers of people are falling victim to ghost brokers selling illegal insurance policies, with victims losing more than £2,000 on average. Alice Porter reports.
Wayne thought he had legitimate car insurance. It was only after he tried to make a claim after a crash that he discovered the truth.
We've called up Aviva, who was the suggested people to call, and they told me that there wasn't a policy taken out in my name and that the number that we had given them was not a number they would use for a policy normally, which is when the dust settled in and you realise that this is a scam.
Aviva weren't at fault. Wayne had bought the insurance online after it was advertised on social media, half the price of other companies. He received documents that looked so real, they even fooled the police officer at the accident.
She pulled me to a side and she was saying, "Oh, your car's not popping up as insured." So I straight away went to my glove box, pulled the insurance document out, showed her the document, and she read through it. Took a couple of minutes, and then she came back to me and said, "That's totally fine."
Ghost breaking is when criminals either sell fake policies to drivers or falsify information given to genuine insurance companies to keep costs down for drivers. This leaves people without valid car insurance, which is illegal. 87% of drivers said their car insurance premiums increased last year. And almost half of young drivers said insurance costs were a top concern. Exclusive data obtained by Sky News reveals ghost broking reports rose by 30% since 2019. And last year, victims of these scams lost an average of £2,206. And police say young people are most likely to be targeted.
Social media is amplifying some of these frauds. There are limited barriers to entry for social media accounts to be set up, so people can take out car insurance and spread the word quite widely. Do your research and make sure you're dealing with a genuine broker or genuine insurance company. If the conversation's been moved onto WhatsApp, for example, you know, alarm bells should be ringing.
Wayne lost over £500 from the scam and also had to pay for the repairs to his car. Ghost brokers may not be genuine, but they leave behind a trail of very real victims. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Now, it's a huge week for dog owners in the United States. This is not a big story, but we like showing pictures of dogs. It's the Westminster Kennel Club dog show. It's named after a hotel in Manhattan called the Westminster.
And it's there anymore?
No, that's right. It's being held in Madison Square Garden. So let's just show you Fiona the Pekingese. There she is. She looks great, doesn't she?
Do you think she's named after Fiona in Shrek? Because she looks a little bit like an ogre.
Oh, I wouldn't have seen the similarity. There's not much green there. She's one of about 2,500 dogs that's competing for Best in Show on Tuesday night. Oh, she's very sweet. Judges assess based on breed standards with conformation, agility and obedience events, but I think looking cute and doing silly things with dog toys is only going to help, isn't it?
She looks a bit like Yoda as well.
I can see that more.
What, Yoda?
But what I like about this is the winner it gets called America's Dog, and then it does a whole media programme.
Oh, does it?
Yeah,
it does all the chat shows?
It goes on the chat shows, but it also goes to the New York Stock Exchange as well, apparently.
What, and does the
I don't know if it rings
closing bell?
I'm not sure about that.
Anyway, like beyond her capabilities, but who knows?
That's basically America's
Congratulations to that owner on keeping that fur so tangle-free.
Yeah.
If I kept my dog's fur long, it would be like that, but just full of matted knots and
leaves.
Yeah, twigs, bits of cake.
We should probably talk about different sporting events now and what you've got coming up in the sport.
Quite enjoying the dog pictures. Yeah, really big day for the Six Nations yesterday. It was FA Cup day as well, we should say. But for the Six Nations, if you're an England fan, the France match was pretty key, really. You know, if England were to make it 2 losses in a row, that's pretty much the whole thing gone for another year. And I don't think many people gave them much chance of beating France because France was so good in the first round of matches. And somehow, England were very gritty and found a way.
Pulled it off.
Plenty to cheer at Twickenham yesterday. The Six Nations continues today. Ireland continue their defence of their title. They take on Scotland at Murrayfield. We will show you the bits of that captivating match at Twickenham, including the winning try. Wasn't such a good day for Wales in Rome. Another bad day for them. We'll tell you how they lose for the 3rd time in 4 meetings with Italy. That's their 14th loss in a row. FA Cup action too, as I said, with Chelsea's poor run of form going on as they're knocked out by Brighton after Manchester City survive a little bit of a scare at Leyton Orient. And we've news from the Scottish Cup too, as the holders Celtic claim their place in the quarter-finals.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Welcome back. We've got all the sport for you in just a moment. In the meantime, though, our top stories here this morning. And the parents of 2 of the young victims of the Southport murders have spoken out for the first time, recalling the moment they heard their daughters had been attacked. 5 Thai hostages have been reunited with their families in Bangkok after being held captive in Gaza for over a year. The government says it's determined to uphold high standards of conduct as the Health Minister, Andrew Gwyn's sacked for making offensive comments in a WhatsApp group. We uncovered the struggle facing parents of children with disabilities, with almost half saying they're unable to find a school that meets their child's needs. Now, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have made an appearance at the opening ceremony of the Invictus Games in Canada. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan were spotted cheering on the United Kingdom's team as they walked onto the stage.
The Games, now in its 7th edition, is an international multi-sport event for injured and sick military personnel. And the Prince set up the Games back in 2014. They're a huge success and will be coming to Birmingham in 2027.
And it's true, they really are a success, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. And I think it really gives, a direction and a focus. If you're in that horrendous situation where your life is completely changed because, you've lost a foot or a leg or, serving your country, and then to sort of rebuild and use sport to rebuild your life, I think is just so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. A really...
It's a great thing that he did, actually.
Important event, absolutely. Take us to the rest of the sport. Lots going on.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day yesterday, what a sort of topsy-turvy match it was at Twickenham. And every time France sort of nudged ahead in that match, you thought, oh, well, they're just going to run away with it now, and that's it. England will have suffered another, near miss and nearly win, not quite getting over the line. But actually, that wasn't the case. They found a bit of real grit and did get over the line. Finn Smith was the new fly half, and he was magnificent. Having started quite shakily, he really grew into the match. He's very young, he's only 22, so a lot of pressure on him. But he delivered, he did the pass for the final try with 1 minute to go, and he delivered the final kick of the match, so they won by a point.
It's going to be so good for their morale, isn't it?
Huge for their morale, but also to tweak the team, make those changes, and for it to make a difference, even though it was so tight, I think is really important. And it also makes the competition a bit more wide open, because from the first weekend, it looked like there were only really 2 horses in it. Yeah. And now, actually, it's wide open again, which is great. You want that in a competition. You don't want it... You don't want to know who's going to win in the end. Even though you suspect, you just would rather a bit of jeopardy. Anyway, let's have a look at the action.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I've had a wonderful career in football, but now I want to give something back. I want to help our game's young players.
Whether you do or don't make it, you're prepared for life itself.
One player makes it, then I've done my job.
This time I'm looking at other ways we can support our younger footballers.
I still have them dreams that normal parents have.
It's exciting to know that you've got a child who actually has a love for something and wants to pursue it.
Have you not owned it yet? No.
Southampton's academy has an incredible record of producing talent. And one of the biggest success stories has recently rejoined the club. But could there be another Adam Lallana making his name in red and white in the future?
I'm just like a normal parent. I'm excited that my lad's in the system. I'm probably more excited watching his games than I'm playing my games now.
I'm a very fortunate parent that I have support as well. So when I can't take Arthur, I've got, whether it's my wife or grandparents, and I know a lot of parents, don't have access to that, aren't able to get the time off work. So it can become stressful for the parents. When parents become stressed, at times they won't know they're doing it, but they put more pressure on the kids. There's an external pressure of making it professionally, which is extremely unrealistic. The football club do a lot to help parents, giving them money per mile for the travel in, and that should happen. There probably should be even more in place, because it only takes one big sale from a youth team player, whether it's Theo or Foxo Chamberlain eventually going, that contributes to every other player that hasn't made it. They can be damaged. When Jurgen Klopp told me there wasn't going to be a contract at Liverpool and I need to find another club, I was distraught for a week.
Even at that age, with all what you've done?
With all that I'd done, with all the success I'd had, that feeling that I had, I remember for the next week of rejection. It was the right thing. I knew there wasn't going to be a contract, but him actually saying to me, there's not going to be a contract, you need to find another club. And I remember just how I slept the next week. It was tough. Imagine what these young boys that they dream to become professional.
What advice would you have to the parents who have these youngsters who are going through the system?
So just because I'm a player and I've played, I still have them dreams that normal parents have. It's so important that we don't pass that pressure on to our kids, whether it's a young girl or a young boy in the academy. I was so lucky. I never felt an ounce of pressure growing up from my parents, not an ounce. So there was never, ever any pressure to perform, to play, to be a professional. I always kind of had to find that myself. If you want to be a professional, you'll learn in the end what you need to do. I'm like a normal parent, but if I've had a bad day or a bad training session myself and then I come and watch my lad, I talk to myself and I say, don't take it out on him today. Don't, if he has a bad session, say, what you're not doing this for, what you're doing that for. You know, I kind of say to myself, when he gets in the car, did you enjoy that today?
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it? Did you have fun? Did you work hard? The pressure's coming. If you're going to make it as a professional, it is coming. It's tough at times, so we don't want the kids feeling it prematurely.
I wanted to hear a bit more from parents. They play such a big role, all that time and all those sacrifices for their kids to just have a chance of making it. So I turned to someone who's seen it from all sides, parent, coach and player.
You don't play 500 league games just because you can throw a ball on the pitch. So being the player that you were and the qualities that you had raw, and now you've got two sons who have come through it, what do you think the differences are and what are the strengths and weaknesses?
Financial situation of the game's massively changed, that they can take more risks, and I think that's the issue. The youth team I played in, there was only 6 places for apprentices in each year at that stage. It wasn't glitz and glamour that they have today, so it was tough, but I think the amount that came through at Carlisle at that time, 8 of us in the 2 years ended up playing in the Premier League. I know the EFL, the Premier League, fund the apprenticeships, so there's not a financial issue for the club to give 24 contracts out to youth players. And it's too much. It's drowning and almost dilutes the quality, I think. If you're in a club full-time, you should be elite. I worked 13s, 14s, 15s, 16s at Derby. It used to break my heart because you'd sit in parents' evening knowing that the kid wasn't at the level.
But you had to keep him.
But we had to keep him because you couldn't fulfil a games programme.
Yeah.
Whereas if you flip that to 1 games programme per 2 age groups, in my opinion, yes. I don't know, but you'd be carrying less bodies.
Yes.
Some people don't develop at the same rate as others physically.
Yeah.
But I'm a believer that you find a way. You know,
Yeah.
you look at some of the best players in the leagues, and people say, oh, they'd have been released if they were in England. You know, your Bernardo Silvas, your Messis.
Yeah.
You know, there's smaller players, but I don't think they would.
So Liam goes to City, Finn goes to Curtin. Psychologically, how did that affect you personally as a parent?
It's really difficult as a mum seeing them both go off to do the same job, but very different rewards. So Liam loved his time at Derby. Obviously, Derby decided that they wanted to sell him. So as a mum, devastated. He's just turned 16, losing my baby, my firstborn, and he's moved away.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Still to come here on The Breakfast Show, we'll have another look at the Sunday papers in our news review. This morning with Mail Online reporter Letters Bromowski and the journalist and political commentator Jada Zee.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a 4th indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing. As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
Are you diminished by claims that you're a racist?
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
The Premier League is exclusively on Peacock. Two of the league's biggest clubs find themselves at the wrong end of the table.
And the mood turns extremely sour.
Desperately chasing a win to turn their season around.
It's a beautiful finish.
Tottenham Hotspur.
To Eriksen. Back towards Amman.
Manchester United. This is the Premier League. February 16, only on Peacock.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Time now for another look at the Sunday papers in our news review. I'm joined this morning by Mail Online reporter Letis Bromovsky and journalist and political commentator Jade Azim. So welcome back to both of you. And we talked at length in the last hour about the extraordinary interview in the Sunday Times, which we'll come on to in a moment, with the parents of two of the victims of the Southport stabbings. It's also on the front of the Sunday Mirror, and you wanted to pick up on that, Letis, to kick us off.
Exactly. I think it just highlights the importance of this story and how important it is that these girls who've died aren't just viewed as the victims of a sort of mass murderer, but they're also humanised. And that, I think, is what their parents are trying to do right now, is change the narrative behind them, show them as these little girls who had all their lives ahead of them, how they loved doing these different sort of things and reading books and learning more and just being with their parents, being with their friends and going outside. And it's really a side of the girls that we haven't necessarily seen up to this point, because as the press ourselves definitely, but also as the public, we get swept up in the trial and the killer and what motivated him to do such a horrific, heinous act, that now that that's over and Axel's been sentenced to 52 years, we can now take a moment to step back, look at these girls for the light that they brought to the world for no matter how short amount of time it was.
And also because it is such an important interview and an important message that they have, the fact that the Sunday Mirror has put it on their front page, even though it's another paper's interview, is quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And let's go to the interview that they've done with the Sunday Times then. They've picked out the headline, we're constantly looking for light in the darkness. And they do, as Letis was saying, they paint an extraordinary picture of these beautiful young girls, but they also tell the harrowing story of them finding out the news that they had been killed.
Yeah, it's a heartwarming tribute to the little girls, actually. One of the quotes that sticks out to me is that Elsie's mother says that it was an honour to be her mum, and she talks about the sheer kindness that that little girl sort of brought to the world. So it's just got some really, really heartwarming sort of aspects of their human stories. But it also does talk about sort of how they came to find out, but also the pain that they went through with this really public case. And they talked about how they actually criticised the judge for going into too much injury detail. So it is that human element to it, but it's also about, you know, just the pain that the case caused.
Yeah, and you talk about how important to put the girls front and centre of people's minds and not the killers. But I guess there are still questions to be asked. There is going to be a public inquiry into how he came to carry out the acts he did and without being stopped. So there's always going to be that discussion and that debate, isn't there?
Absolutely. And as you say, the parents have already been calling in these stories to say that there have been failings, and they welcome this public inquiry that the government's going to do to see what more could have been done and what can be done in the future to make sure this never, ever happens again.
Absolutely. Let's move on to The Observer now. Jade, we talked about their main story on the front page, but their second story is about gambling firms and use of data. So what exactly are they alleging here?
Yeah, so just beforehand, there's been no response yet from either company, but this is a fascinating, particularly shocking story, actually, about the idea that gambling firms have been trading data with Meta so that their users are getting blitzed with adverts for gambling casinos whenever they use Facebook. So there's clearly a lot to be said about a potential data breach here. And it's interesting that Ian Duncan-Smith, the Conservative chair of the APPG on gambling, has called for an immediate intervention. And actually, this is a cross-party thing where we've talked about gambling in the past. This has been a sort of cross-party appeal to put some action in, and this is probably going to sort of ignite that conversation again.
Well, yeah, and again, it reopens that debate about the use of our data and how aware we are of its value, and how there are some companies who just see it as the most important thing because it tells us so much about prospective customers.
And it also shows how it can be misused. There's always going to be that fiery debate between, your right to privacy and the data being used by companies when people give it to them and using that. But this particularly feels like a rather dark way to be using it. Gambling is a very addictive and dangerous thing that people can be getting into. And so to be using advertisements against people who are already using gambling and spending their money in that way feels like sort of, giving drugs to an addictive person. It feels like a unfair way to be using that data.
Yeah, really interesting to see how that develops, that story. You wanted to talk about the story on the Sunday Telegraph's front page about Donald Trump talking about Prince Harry.
Yes, so Donald Trump has come out and he said yesterday, that he's not going to deport Prince Harry. And this comes, though, alongside a comment that he said about Meghan, saying he's got so many issues already because his wife is so terrible. I mean, it's classic Donald Trump to come out and say something so rude. But on the deporting Prince Harry side of it, it's quite interesting because this is a U-turn from Donald Trump. When the whole debate that's going on here is that Prince Harry was potentially going to be deported over lying on his immigration papers about doing drugs. We don't know whether he lied or not, I should say that, but in his book Spare, he later said that he'd done cocaine as a teenager and then experimented with some other drugs as well. And so the Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative right-wing think tank, have been coming after him, saying that we have a public right to know whether he lied in that immigration paper, in which case, if he lied, he could then potentially be deported. When Biden did this, he said, nope, I'm not going to disclose what was on Harry's immigration paper. And Trump came after him. He said, that's outrageous. You're protecting him. You're protecting, these lies and these people like this. Whether Trump has now seen the immigration papers, seen that maybe he didn't lie, we don't know. Maybe we'll never know. But he's now said he's not going to deport Prince Harry. Maybe it's just not worth the argument, but we don't know for now.
He's going to be breathing a sigh of relief. He's actually at the Invictus Games in Canada, I think, at the moment. So, I'm sure the news has reached him. Let's move on, shall we, to The Observer, Jade, because there's an article in here about what the Labour government might do about these giant oil fields where exploration was blocked by a Scottish court, and what the next steps might be.
Yeah, so this is actually a microcosm of a larger story about the sort of green versus growth, and there's sort of this internal tug of war within government about how do you reach maximum growth but also protect your net zero targets. And this is particularly acute in that, yes, so the Prime Minister's weighing up whether to allow this new oil field, this Rosebank North Sea oil field. But the Grantham Institute on Climate Change has come out and said, this is going to absolutely destroy our targets. It's going to be really, really difficult to live up to our net zero commitments in a turbulent world where Trump's also talking about reneging on net zero targets. What does it mean for the future of net zero? And we know that behind the scenes, according to this story, Ed Miliband is considered as a critic of this. But it's this weighing up the green versus growth thing. The government's under a lot of pressure about growth. What do they do?
Well, yes, exactly. And in their manifesto, Labour said they wouldn't back any new exploration projects, but this was one that had been agreed under the Tories, but then got blocked by the courts. And it's whether or not they back this new application for it. But we've got the same issue with Heathrow as well, haven't we?
Yeah, well,
Heathrow expansion. You know, Ed Miliband was saying, he came in and did an interview with me on Friday, and he was saying that, you know, if it does fall within the green, you know, within the green rules, then obviously it's a good thing. But growth seems to be the priority.
Exactly, and I think that there's another sort of aspect to this as well, which is that we don't want to upset President Trump, and we know, like you were saying, he's very much going that green is not the way forward. You know, he's cancelled the wind farms, he's cancelled any further government grants to wind farms and things like that. And it's whether by us continuing to do green initiatives and things like that would somehow enrage him to then push for tariffs or things like this. We're continuously treading this very thin line with him. And this would be something, you know, that they'll probably be taking into consideration how he would react.
Let's move on. We've only got about a minute, but I wonder whether we want to talk about plastic surgery or about weight loss drugs. You choose.
Both of them seem high on the list. One of the plastic surgery stories that we've got here, which I can do really quickly, is that doctors are coming out saying that in order to get plastic surgery, we should be giving mental health checks to those people asking for them. And now, off the face of it, this seems like a very good thing to me. With social media nowadays, people constantly can only compare themselves to other people online. And actually, there's a phrase here called Helen of Troyism, which is what they're using, which is essentially that you can never be beautiful enough. You will never be perfect, continuously trying to change yourself, because you're continuously trying to compare yourself. And I think it's just quite an interesting thing that doctors are saying mental health checks might be the way forward.
Does that make sense, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly on the other story, they're also talking about Wegovy, which is that weight loss drug, being prescribed to a very small number of troops to help with diabetes and weight loss. Again, alongside plastic surgery, the weight loss drug
look of perfection, this idea.
It continues to be really, really salient and just continuously causing debate.
You managed to tie those together beautifully. And you managed to do both.
What are we here for?
Your job is done. We're out of time. So good to have your company this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave.
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away? Sky News, the full story first.
Hello, a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on the show today, heartbreaking tributes to their loved ones. The parents of two of the Southport victims described the moment they heard their little girls had been attacked.
And in sport, England score a last-minute try to beat France at Twickenham and reignite their hopes of winning the Six Nations.
It's Sunday, the 9th of February. Beautiful and happy, the parents of two of the Southport attack victims paid tribute to their daughters and speak out about their ordeal. Home at last, 5 tied hostages reunite with their families in Bangkok after being held captive in Gaza for over a year. Also ahead, Health Minister Andrew Gwynn is sacked over offensive WhatsApp messages, including some said to be anti-Semitic. The parents at breaking point are spending thousands to find a school that meets their children's special educational needs.
We had to focus on what is it that we do to make sure that he has a future.
And in the FA Cup, Chelsea's post-Christmas slump goes on as they crash out at Brighton, but Manchester City squeeze through at Leyton Orient.
Hello, a very good morning. Thanks for joining us here on Breakfast. The parents of two of the young victims of the Southport murders have spoken publicly for the first time about the loss of their daughters. Speaking to the Sunday Times, the parents of Elsie Stankham and BB King described their daughters as caring, beautiful and happy. They were also critical over the sentencing of the girls' killer, Axel Rudakabana, saying it should not have been televised. Well, Adele Robinson is here with me. And Adele, this is an incredibly moving read, isn't it? Tell us a little bit about what they've said and how they described that terrible day.
Yeah, sure. It is. It's very difficult. It's heartbreaking, really. They go into quite a lot of detail about the day it happened, when their daughters died. Elsie's mum describes getting a call from another mother of a child who was also at the dance class saying that something had happened. And she said she just ran. She left the house open. She got in her car. Hands were on the horn, running all the red lights to get there. Elsie's father describes fighting to get inside the dance class when he got there, but said the police literally had to hold him back. They wouldn't let him in. And then they said they both ran off in different directions searching for Elsie, and they described what they saw when they arrived as saying that no human should ever have to witness what they did that day. BB's mum said that the family were actually preparing for a wedding the next day, and it wasn't until her father went to pick her up at the allotted time from the dance class that he saw something had happened. There were ambulances at the scene. He was told what had happened, and he said it still didn't register with him. In fact, he began to sort of look for BB in nearby streets, hoping that she'd be in one of the houses where lots of children had gathered. He then called BB's mother, who was in a shop, Marks and Spencer's. She said she just left, got in a taxi, and said she just ran. And then they described eventually a police officer telling them that their daughter had passed away, and BB's mum fell to the floor screaming. So harrowing details to read.
Absolutely heartbreaking, as you say. They also do express a bit of criticism, don't they, around the sentencing?
Yeah, so there was a plea in directions hearing for the killer, and they were not expecting him to plead guilty. So they said that they were braced for 4 weeks of harrowing evidence. So neither of the families were in court that day. But they were hoping that following on from this guilty plea, they wouldn't have to hear that. Elsie's family said there was a moment and a little bit of hope that none of it was going to come out. Then there was a phone call that night off the liaison officers saying, we need to tell you because it's all going to come out. And then on the Thursday, there was the sentencing. A summary of the evidence was given by the prosecution. And they say that they believe that the injury detail went beyond what was necessary. BB's dad said that upon the sentence being televised as well, we know it has to be heard in court, but why did the whole nation need to see it on television.
Yeah, and the whole interview felt like they want to put their girls back at the centre of the story and away from the killer.
Absolutely, and at no point during their interview did they ever mention his name. They described him as the offender, the perpetrator, he. They want the focus very much to be on their children, paying tribute to them, for them to be remembered as they were when they were alive, not how they passed. So they described Elsie. Elsie's parents described her as confident, one of a kind, happy. Her mother said it was an honour to be her mum. Everything she did was pure enthusiasm. She was grateful for life. And they said how excited she was to go that morning to the dance class to show her friends her newly pierced ears. And then BB's family said she had an innate kindness, a spark about her, that she was hilarious, confident and full of life. And both families said that basically they were wanting their children to be remembered for who they were, and they were looking for light in the darkness, as they put it.
Yeah. Adele, thanks very much indeed. 5 Thai nationals who were released by Hamas after spending more than a year in captivity in Gaza have landed back home in Bangkok. And a warning that the pictures you're about to see from the airport contain flash photography. Thai nationals made up the largest group of foreign hostages held captive by Hamas. And the 5 who returned home today are the second group to be released. They've been working in Israel as agricultural labourers when they were taken. Israel has sent a delegation to Qatar to discuss phase 2 of their ceasefire agreement with Hamas. This weekend, 3 more Israeli hostages were freed in exchange for 183 Palestinian prisoners. Back here, Sakir Starmer has said he's dismayed at the condition of Israeli hostage Eli Sharabi, whose Bristol-born wife and daughters were killed by militants in the October the 7th attacks. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, reports.
Hamas put up a stage in Deir al-Balah in the centre of Gaza for the 5th release of the hostages. These are propaganda moments for Hamas, an opportunity to show that they have not been defeated and still have some control in Gaza, and a message to President Trump that they have no intention of leaving. The hostages, looking thin and frail, were paraded on stage, carrying certificates and then interviewed by a Hamas fighter before they were released. Eli Sharabi said that he was looking forward to seeing his wife Leanne and 2 daughters again. He didn't know that all 3 of them had been killed on October the 7th. His brother Yossi was also taken hostage but died last year in Gaza.
All the way through this, we've wondered whether what's kept him going is the prospect of being reunited with Leanne and the girls. I know that the first question that he's going to ask as soon as he got into the Red Cross vehicle was going to be, if he doesn't know that they're dead, are Leanne and the girls waiting for me? And I think one of the distressing things for me to think about is that news, if it has to be broken to him, is going to be broken to him by a stranger in the back of a jeep on Gazan soil.
The 3 men appeared weak as they were transferred to the IDF. There is a real feeling of shock and anger in Israel, and a new urgency to get all of the hostages home as quick as possible. Benjamin Netanyahu, spending the weekend in Washington, has reacted angrily and warned that there will be consequences, without elaborating what.
The State of Israel views Hamas's repeated violations with great severity and the situation of the 3 abductees who were released this morning with great severity. We will not remain silent about this. A message has been passed on to the mediators and actions will be taken accordingly.
The 3 men have been reunited with their families. They're now being looked after at a hospital outside Tel Aviv. In exchange, 183 Palestinian prisoners were released from Israeli jails. Most of them were sent back to Gaza. 42 were taken into the West Bank. They emerged from the buses wearing the black and white Palestinian keffiyeh, making victory signs and into celebrating crowds. At least 1 elderly man had to be carried off the coach. 7 were taken to hospital for medical treatment. Israeli prison guards reportedly made them watch a video showing the destruction of Gaza before they were released. Both sides are accusing the other of unacceptable tactics. But we are almost halfway through the first phase of the ceasefire, and it still holds for now. Alistair Bungle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Health Minister Andrew Gwynn has been sacked over anti-Semitic comments reportedly made in a WhatsApp group. He's also accused of making a joke about one of his constituents, a pensioner, saying he hopes she died before the next election. Well, let's bring in our political correspondent, Amanda Acas. Hi there, Amanda. So tell us more about what he's supposed to have said and how he's reacted since being sacked.
Yes, so the Mail on Sunday has got hold of thousands of messages, which it says are from a WhatsApp group made up of a group of Labour councillors and party officials and the MP, Andrew Gwynn, and it claims at least one other MP from the Greater Manchester area. And a number of the comments made within this WhatsApp group are really deeply quite offensive. So in one of the messages, Mr. Gwynn made a comment about someone sounding too Jewish or too militaristic on the basis of their name, asking whether they're in the Israeli Special Forces Mossad. He mocked the Labour MP Diane Abbott as being the first black MP at the dispatch box for PMQs, made a sexist lewd comment, shared a sexist lewd tweet about Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, who's indeed a neighbouring MP in Manchester. And also he joked about a constituent, a 72-year-old woman who had emailed her local councillor asking about bin collections, saying that she hadn't voted for Labour, and he suggested that he should reply saying she would have croaked, she would have died, in other words, before the next council election, and also made a joke about a constituent being mown down by a truck. When the Mail went to Number 10 about this yesterday, they responded very quickly, sacking Andrew Gwynn from his post as a junior minister for public health, and he's also been suspended from the Labour Party. They're currently investigating. Governments say that Sir Keir Starmer is determined to uphold high standards of those in public office. And in a statement, Mr. Gwynn himself says, "I deeply regret my badly misjudged comments and apologise for any offence I've caused. I entirely understand the decisions the PM and the party have taken, and while very sad to have been suspended, will support them in any way I can." Now, clearly, the reaction to this has been fairly outraged across the board. The Conservative Party say it shows the attitude that the Labour Party have towards pensioners, and the Jewish Labour movement say they're appalled by the vile anti-Semitic, racist and discriminatory comments made by him. That's a particularly sensitive issue for the Labour Party. Sir Keir Starmer himself has spent many years trying to prove that their party has moved on from the controversy over anti-Semitism there in the past. And more broadly, this is the third minister to have had to resign or be sacked in disgrace since the government won the election back in July. So I think Sir Keir Starmer will be hoping that by sacking him quickly, drawing a line, he gets some credit from that, but I think it's deeply embarrassing for the Labour Party. This isn't a new MP. Andrew Gwynn is someone who was first elected 20 years ago, so I think there'll be many questions asked about that today.
Yeah, I'm sure it's not the last we'll hear of it, for sure. Amanda, thanks very much indeed. And it's bound to be discussed as well this morning on Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. He's going to be joined by the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, as well as Alex Burghardt, the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, and the Bishop of London, Dame Sarah Mullally. So do join Trevor. It's not long to wait, about 17 minutes. In the meantime, though, some of the morning's other news and the remaining wreckage of both the Black Hawk helicopter and the passenger plane it collided with have been recovered from Washington's Potomac River. 67 people were killed when the military aircraft collided mid-air with the plane near to the Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport last week. Investigators are now analysing the wreckage for marks to try to determine the angle of impact. Friends star David Schwimmer is calling for Kanye West to be banned from X over anti-Semitic comments. In an Instagram post, the actor called on the platform's owner, Elon Musk, to stop giving the rapper a megaphone. He added, his sick hate speech results in real-life violence against Jews. Irish boxer John Cooney has died a week after suffering a brain injury in a championship fight. The 28-year-old was taken to intensive care after he lost to Welsh boxer Nathan Howells at the Ulster Hall last Saturday. Posting on social media this morning, his promoters confirmed he died in hospital, describing him as a much-loved son, brother and partner. Almost half of parents or guardians of children with disabilities have struggled to find a school that meets their child's needs. Disability charity Sense carried out the research and found that parents are struggling with a financial or mental health toll. Our education reporter, Anjum Pirbakos, has been speaking to a mother who spent thousands to get her son the right support.
That was his first kilt and it was his first birthday. And it's the family tartan.
Tia, a mother who's had to give up her job and fight for years to secure the right education for her son.
My dream for him is for him to explore the world. Yeah. And I hope that language doesn't play a barrier.
Arun has a developmental language disorder, which affects 1 in 14 children.
We were completely broken hearing this news. But we had to channel our energies into ensuring his needs would be met. And we had to focus on what is it that we do to make sure that he has a future. It's my baby.
But many families say a lack of awareness of this disorder means vital support is missing.
At every step, there were hurdles, obstacles, challenges. It was really, really difficult right the way through. And so we had to invest in private support, private assessments to just reveal that, OK, he had this very serious language disorder, a disability that is lifelong and affects so many children.
It's not only families that are struggling. Special schools are experiencing the effects of a broken system.
Local authorities haven't had the power, in fact it's been illegal for them to open any kind of a school, let alone a special school. And I think they get a lot of unfair blame, really, and I'm hoping that that's something that the new schools bill will address.
Bridget Phillipson allocated £1 billion for SEND provision. Do you think that's going to make a difference?
Well, it will make a difference because mainstream school budgets are really struggling because the increases in funding for additional support for children with special needs hasn't kept pace with inflation or with our understanding of how those needs should be met.
Research shared exclusively with Sky News by the disability charity Sense found 45% of parents with disabled children have struggled to find a school that meets their child's needs. 38% said their child had to travel a long way to attend a school that met their needs. 45% of families also face problems with education healthcare plans. These are legal documents outlining additional support which will be provided.
The emotional impact cannot be underestimated. Many of these families are at breaking point. They're battling for support on every front: social care, education, health, and it shouldn't have to be that way.
Tia's local authority said they always work with families to try and resolve disputes despite stretched budgets and increasing demand. For Tia, another hurdle lies ahead: securing transport to school. And for many parents like Tia, the struggles seem endless. Anjum Pirbakos, Sky News.
Well, a Department for Education spokesperson said every child and young person deserves the best life chances, which is why we announced a significant £1 billion investment into the SEND system and a further £740 million for local authorities to create more specialist places where they're most needed. But in a system that's too skewed towards specialist provision and over-reliance on education healthcare plans, we know families are too often forced to fight to get the right support. We're determined to rebuild families' confidence in a system so many rely on. The reform families are crying out for will take time, but with a greater focus on mainstream provision and more early intervention, we will deliver the change that is so desperately needed. Now, Jackie's here. Tell us about the sport, Jackie.
Well, it was butterfingers for France a little bit yesterday, but England scrapped their way to, I think, what will become a very famous victory after so many near misses. It's been a great start to this season's Six Nations. And that did continue with that victory for England against France. I don't think many people would have predicted. We'll show you how they came back to take victory late on at Twickenham. and the story of yet another defeat for Wales against Italy. Plus, FA Cup action as well, with Chelsea's poor run of form going on as they're knocked out by Brighton after Manchester City survive a scare at Leyton Orient.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon. Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Oh! Getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted, she was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks. I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's chief North of England correspondent. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
So Jackie's here with the sport, and what a day of rugby it was yesterday.
It was really sort of smash and grab really for England in the end in that match at Twickenham. I don't think many people before the match thought they would beat France, and then there was the start for Finn Smith at fly half, starting for the first time. Bit of an indifferent first half, but my goodness, what a difference he made in the second. Ended up being man of the match and had the pass that was ended up in the winning try and then converted under extreme pressure with a minute to go. So obviously a good pick.
Absolutely.
What a good selection.
And a good day at the office.
And yes, Mara Toji said they're not done. There could be more to come. Let's have a look.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
I've had a wonderful career in football, but now I want to give something back. I want to help our game's young players.
Whether you do or don't make it, you're prepared for life itself.
One player makes it, then I've done my job.
This time I'm looking at other ways we can support our younger footballers.
I still have them dreams that normal parents have.
It's exciting to know that you've got a child who actually has a love for something and wants to pursue it.
Have you not owned it yet?
No.
Southampton's academy has an incredible record of producing talent. And one of the biggest success stories has recently rejoined the club. But could there be another Adam Lallana making his name in red and white in the future.
I'm just like a normal parent. I'm excited that my lad's in the system. I'm probably more excited watching his games than I'm playing my games now.
I'm a very fortunate parent that I have support as well. So when I can't take Arthur, I've got, whether it's my wife or grandparents, and I know a lot of parents, don't have access to that, aren't able to get the time off work. So it can become stressful for the parents. When parents become stressed, at times they won't know they're doing it, but they put more pressure on the kids. There's an external pressure of making it professionally, which is extremely unrealistic. The football club do a lot to help parents, giving them money per mile for the travelling, and that should happen. There probably should be even more in place, because it only takes one big sale from a youth team player, whether it's Theo or Foxo Chamberlain eventually going, that contributes to every other player that hasn't made it. They can be damaged. When Jurgen Klopp told me there wasn't going to be a contract at Liverpool and I need to find another club, I was distraught for a week.
Even at that age, with all what you've done?
With all that I'd done, with all the success I'd had, that feeling that I had, I remember for the next week of rejection. It was the right thing. I knew there wasn't going to be a contract, but him actually saying to me, there's not going to be a contract, you need to find another club. I remember just how I slept the next week. It was tough. Imagine what these young boys that they dream to become professional.
What advice would you have to the parents who have these youngsters who are going through the system?
So just because I'm a player and I've played, I still have them dreams.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Let's have a quick check on the weather. And
Is it rain?
It's going to be cold and rain, yeah. Oh, there you go, I've done it now. Cold over the next few days, likely turning milder from midweek with a chilly easterly wind and some nighttime frosts. Clear spells over northern England, southwestern England and the west of Ireland mean it's frosty in places there too. Stay with us. Trevor Phillips will be up next with his show. He's going to be speaking to the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook, as well as reaction from the opposition as well. So stay tuned for Trevor Phillips.
Another one bites the dust. Last night, Andrew Gwynn followed Louise Haigh and Tulip Siddiq out of the ministerial door, the third inside 3 months. But that may turn out to be the least of the government's problems this coming week. The Health Secretary complains we've got too many foreign doctors. But if not them, who's going to do your brain surgery? The Housing Minister says they'll build more homes. But with more than 1 million immigrants swelling the population each year, will anyone notice? He's riding high in the polls, but he's been there before, only to fall at the electoral hurdle. Could this time be different? For the government, we'll be joined by Housing Minister Matthew Pennycook. And for the Conservatives, by Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Alex Burkhardt. The Church of England meets this week in the middle of a safeguarding crisis. There are questions over who will be the next Archbishop of Canterbury. We've spoken to the Bishop of London, Dame Sarah Mullally. Known as Britain's strictest head teacher and a hero to many on the right, she's in an almighty row with the Education Secretary. I'll be joined live by Catherine Birbalsingh. And the former Conservative MP now fighting for Ukraine in its fight for survival against Russia. I'll speak live to Jack Lopresti in Kyiv. Plus, with us throughout the show, former Labour advisor and Keir Starmer biographer Tom Baldwin. Broadcaster Carolyn Quinn. And former Number 10 Communications Director Guto Harry. Welcome to Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips. Let no one say that on this programme we don't recognise good news for the government when we see it. The Chancellor must have given at least a single cheer at the Bank of England's quarter-point interest rate cut this week. The Prime Minister probably breathed a sigh of relief when President Trump hinted that they were such good mates that we might avoid the tariffs he planned for the bad guys in Brussels. And the Tories are down to third place in the opinion polls. But, and there's always a but, 3 buts in fact. Official growth forecasts for the next 2 years are down. The consensus on inflation is up. And the biggest but of all, Nigel Farage is smiling even more than usual, a sight that's clearly striking fear into both Labour and Conservative hearts. Let's start this morning with the government. I'm joined by the Housing Minister, Matthew Pennycook. Good morning.
Morning, Trevor.
Andrew Gwynn has been dismissed from his ministerial job, suspended from the Labour Party because of WhatsApp messages that he appears to admit were anti-Semitic, racist, sexist and just in terribly bad taste. Will other Labour MPs and councillors on that WhatsApp group be suspended?
I haven't seen the details of the specific WhatsApp conversations in question, but the comments that Andrew Gwynn made, let's be clear, are completely unacceptable. And the Prime Minister has been very clear from day one of this Labour government that he is determined to uphold the highest standards of public office, determined to be a government that's in the service of working people, and he's acted decisively to dismiss Andrew Gwynn for that reason.
Yes, he's acted decisively, but we know that there is at least one other Labour MP and there are other Labour councillors in that group. Will they be suspended?
Well, the Labour Party, as you know, Trevor, have administratively suspended Andrew Gwynn. He's lost the Labour whip. There's an investigation taking place about that WhatsApp conversation. But we're very clear that the type of language used is completely unacceptable.
But we know that there is at least another Labour MP. His name will be known to the Prime Minister. Why isn't he this morning not suspended?
I don't know personally what other people on that WhatsApp conversation have said. I said I've been very clear there's an investigation taking place into the whole incident. Andrew Gwynn, who we know what his comments have said, which are completely unacceptable, has been suspended from the Labour Party, has lost the Labour Party. The investigation will take place.
It's in the newspaper this morning that there's another Labour MP. You don't need an investigation. Everybody knows that.
And if
why isn't that person suspended?
And I think what the public can take from the way the Prime Minister has acted decisively in this case to dismiss Andrew Gwynn is that if any other Labour MP or minister falls short, He will act to uphold the highest standards in public office. We've been very clear about that, and we're not going to let what is ultimately a distraction deter us from our plan for change, delivering for the British people.
Well, the problem is that he's now going to have, if he does as you say, this is going to make that story stretch on until he does dismiss that person. But let me just deal with what is the underlying issue here, whether or not the Prime Minister acted decisively. The real problem is that this exchange seems to have been completely unremarkable amongst Labour people in a group that included a minister and a Labour MP, and that nobody else in this group, which these exchanges went on for a couple of years, nobody else said, look, mate, what are you saying? Now, when you told us you'd gotten rid of the anti-Semites, were you kidding us or were you kidding yourselves? Because there were anti-Semitic remarks in this WhatsApp group that nobody seemed to have paid attention to.
And that is concerning, and those remarks are completely unacceptable.
And the people in that group are still in the Labour Party.
And an investigation is taking place, and any action that needs to follow from that investigation will be seen through. I don't think anyone can be in any doubt about this Prime Minister or this government's commitment to upholding the highest standards in public office and to rooting out anti-Semitism from the Labour Party, root and branch.
The apology that Mr Gwynne has issued, let me ask you, just as a person, he says these remarks were misjudged. I apologise for any offence I've caused. How about I'm sorry I insulted my female elderly and Jewish constituents and I realise I'm not really fit to be a Member of Parliament? That's a proper apology rather than, oh, I'm sorry I caused any offence.
I don't speak for Andrew, and he can speak for himself.
Yeah, but you can speak for yourself and say, do you think do you think that non-apology is appropriate here?
I think the view of the government on this situation, on what Andrew Gwynne has said, is perfectly clear and can be taken from how quickly and how decisively we've acted to dismiss him from his ministerial role. As I've said, the language is completely unacceptable. In some instances, it's deeply concerning.
It's not just language, it's what he thought.
What he thought.
It's a real level of contempt for his constituents, isn't it?
And the Prime Minister has acted to dismiss him from his ministerial role. As I've said, he's been suspended from the Labour whip. There's an administrative suspension from the party as well. I don't think your viewers would say there's anything more decisive we could have done in response, and as quickly as we have acted in response to this situation.
All right, let's talk about your area of responsibility, housing. You published plans to streamline the buying of homes today, but surely your priority should be ensuring that there are enough homes available in the right places on the right terms first.
Absolutely, and we've got to build many, many more homes of all types of tenures because we have a chronic deficit, and that goes back many decades under successive governments, let's be honest about this, who have failed to build enough homes in all parts of the country. We've got to act on that. We are acting. We overhauled the National Planning Policy Framework within our first 6 months in office. We've taken a series of decisive steps. And the announcement we've made today, which is a small but important part of that plan for change, boosting living standards, meeting that 1.5 million new home target, will make a difference. It will speed up the home buying and selling process. At the moment, it's too costly, it's too stressful. Huge numbers of house sales fall through. That costs the economy around £400 million. So we're taking action on that. Increased protections for leaseholders as well, as part of our home ownership drive to protect them as we move to bring the leasehold system to an end completely. But it's just one step on a wider push.
You're promising 1.5 million homes during this parliamentary term, but over that period, the population is going to increase by just over 2 million people, mostly immigrants. Is anybody going to notice that you've built these new homes? Because they're going to have to house people who come into the country.
I'd say a couple of things on that point. I think the projections go back to some of the trends under the last government. And we've been very clear. The inheritance we've been given from the previous Conservative government is dire in this sense. We have got to restore order to the asylum and immigration system. We've got to bring down levels of net migration. We're committed to doing so. But even if migration wasn't a factor in the housing crisis, it's just one of many factors. I think you'd recognise that, Trevor. Yes. House sales, prices, taxation policy, all of these are factors. Even if there was no net migration pressure on housing, we would still have to build huge numbers of homes of all tenures because of that chronic mismatch between supply and demand over many decades.
Yeah, there is great pressure. But actually, you just said something, if I may say so, it's extremely interesting. You are, by implication, saying that you're going to bring immigration numbers down below the 315,000 number that the Chancellor used in her budget projections. So now now we know we've got a Labour target, that immigration is going to dip well below that 300,000
we don't have
target.
Forgive me, you're putting words into my mouth. We don't have a target.
No, I'm just interpreting the word you said.
We've been very clear that levels of net migration need to come down, and that will relieve pressure on the housing
My
system.
point is they need to come down below.
We're not going to set arbitrary
Come
targets.
down from 900,000, from the 700,000, or from 300,000 that's in your target,
Trevor,
that's in your budget projections?
What we're not going to do is set arbitrary targets on migration like the last government did. We're going to take real action to bring down levels of migration.
I'm just trying to get clear what you mean when you say they're coming down. What are they coming down from? The actual number that came across last year, 900,000, or the 300,000 that Rachel Reeves incorporated in her budget?
They're coming down from an inheritance where we've seen migration at unprecedented levels. You'll know the figures between 2019 and 24. We've seen at some places immigration levels at nearly 1 million. They've got to come down from that level. When it comes to skilling up the workforce, we've got to do more. And that will relieve pressure on the housing crisis. But the point I'm making, I think your viewers will recognise, is even if net migration wasn't a pressure on housing, and it's one factor amongst many, we'd still have to build a huge number of homes of all tenures because of this chronic mismatch. And we're taking decisive action to ensure that's the case.
All right. Let's just deal with another aspect of this. Your colleague Wes Streeting complains this weekend, too many foreign doctors. But you've capped the number of medical students in training at just over 8,000. The previous government did too. So there's actually no real chance of reducing our dependency on foreign doctors. Isn't this just about a political signal that you're sending out that tells us how worried you are about Nigel Farage?
No, I don't think it's a political signal. It picks up on our previous conversation about levels of net migration. We have to end our dependency on sources of foreign workers. Construction, my own area of expertise, is a similar challenge. And it is a challenge.
We're short of 100,000 a year, I gather.
And we have been overly reliant on overseas workers for too long. I think I'd make 2 points in terms of what the government can practically do to ensure that situation is turned around. First, we've got to do more to skill up our own people. I think everyone's agreed on that point. There's already work underway. For example, there's £140 million invested from industry in over 30 new home building sites.
But I'm putting Wes Streeting's point to you. He says too many foreign doctors. And my question is, what are you going to do about that? Or is this just noise?
It's not just noise, and the government
OK, you're going to stop foreign doctors coming in.
And the government has, across departments...
Raise the cap. What are you going to do?
A joined up... I'll let Mr Streeting speak for himself on the workforce plan for the NHS. But the government has a cross-departmental plan to boost skills in the right areas. I'm trying to explain to you what we're doing on construction, and that will start to feed through. But more importantly, I think when it comes to home building, we've also got to reform, we've got to improve productivity. There are things we can do through new methods of construction, which will make things more productive. But we need the certainty of pipeline on homes coming through to ensure that those new methods can come.
OK, I'm only interrupting you because I want to give you the chance to explain your boss's conduct, if I can put it that way. The Grenfell families say that Angela Rayner was in some way dismissive, didn't consult them properly over the plans to bring down the tower. Yeah. Was there something in Angela Rayner's manner that led them to feel that she wasn't really paying attention to them?
I don't think that's fair. I understand why the bereaved survivors, the community, are frustrated about the pace of change in this area, the lack of justice that they've been given. There's a lot of frustration in the community. This is an incredibly sensitive topic. The Prime Minister and the Building Safety Minister have engaged extensively with the community. They've had an ongoing dialogue. They've had multiple avenues to feed in. It is a sensitive issue, and I think the crux of the issue is there's no consensus on what should happen to the tower. You know, some people want to see that tower remain...
But you're going to bring it down, aren't you?
We are going to bring it down because through independent expert advice, we've been told that it's unsafe, that it is degrading. We're going to bring it down, though, I think importantly, in a sensitive way, not demolishing it, in a sensitive planned reduction over 2 years after the 8th anniversary.
Matthew Pennycook, thank you very much for your time this
Thank you
morning.
very much.
Right, let us see what our panel made of all that. We're joined all morning by the former Labour advisor and Keir Starmer biographer Tom Baldwin, broadcaster and journalist Carolyn Quinn, and the former Number 10 Communications Director Guto Harry. We're all grown-ups here, and we've all been involved in the rough and tumble of politics. On this issue with Andrew Gwynn, Carolyn, is there something different to rough and tumble about this exchange?
Well, you saw Matthew Pennycook there struggling to explain how these distasteful, immature comments could have been made, thrown around by members of the Labour Party, a Labour Party that we've been told has tackled or has almost tackled the anti-Semitic problems that it's had in the past. It says it's stopped that sort of behaviour. It seems that some members on this group still think that it's fine to chat privately in those sorts of terms, which many people will find absolutely distasteful. And I was very pleased that you picked up on the apology that Andrew Gwynn has made. I hate this any offence caused type apology. If you're going to apologise and accept that you will have really upset people with that sort of sexist, misogynistic, anti-Semitic, distasteful language. Just own it and, don't say any offence caused.
Tom, Matthew Pennycook, of course, rode on the fact that Keir Starmer's acted quickly, but he hasn't acted comprehensively, has he? Because there are other people in this group who, it seems, just let this pass.
Yeah, this is the idea that if you're receiving these messages, you're as guilty as...
nobody's saying you're as guilty.
You have some shared guilt in that you're receiving messages passively, you're not taking... Yeah. No, we don't know whether somebody did do that. We haven't seen the content of this entire WhatsApp exchange. We've just seen extracts of the paper. What I would say, though, is that it's a very, very, very quick sacking. I mean, his feet have not touched the floor. He's out. And I think that's a good sign. There's a reason for that. Because this sort of story creates the impression that that's what politicians are really like. Yeah, they say this stuff in public, but privately, when they're chatting to their mates, they despise voters. They make racist jokes. They despise the pensioner in their constituency. I don't think that's true. You and I know lots of politicians. Most politicians are not like that. And I do kind of want to... There's a sort of sense sometimes in the way these things are covered that, at last, they've been unmasked. This is a sign of what all politicians like. This is an exception, and he's been exceptionally fast removed from the government, and that's absolutely right.
Guto?
I don't think Andrew Gwynn genuinely wants a pensioner to die by the next election because, she hasn't voted for him. But he did say it. And so it comes back to why would you say it? Why would you say it in the pub when you're, 3 sheets to the wind is sort of mysterious enough? Why would you, in the cold light of day, actually put that in writing for a WhatsApp group? That's the thing that keeps astonishing me over and over. We've got to acknowledge that Keir Starmer's acted quickly. Sometimes, I think, people can act too quickly here. I think there is a case for due process. And in considering what exactly the implications are for others, he's right to pause and check. If you happen to be on a WhatsApp group where somebody, when you're not even watching it, says something...
You're going to say that, Guto, because your old boss never wanted to sack anybody for anything.
Well, he did believe in due process. He did believe that the final word should go to the democratically electable person, not some sort of great and the good sort of lord whatever who's been brought in to be the standard sort of arbiter. Often those people have very, very blunt instruments. So, yes, he was right to do that. But he did move decisively once he was in full knowledge of the facts. And I think that is really important in public life.
And noises off, like this, Labour do not want to be disrupted from the agenda that they're trying to push already. And they've already got, if they've got a grid of things that they want to talk about, they've already got a disruptor on the other side of the Atlantic who seems to be changing the agenda quite regularly. So this is something they could have done without, and they have acted quickly in this case.
This is a problem, isn't it, Tom, that actually whatever view you take about that, there's noise. And actually, whatever the government wanted to the public to hear from it today and tomorrow, is really not going to be heard. And he has to keep doing this.
Events. Yeah. And the way you respond to events says a lot about as much as about you as a government as what you actually want to say in the first place. And yeah, you rightly sort of picked up, Gita, about how these sort of things used to be handled. You know, where these would drag on for days, weeks even, with Boris Johnson clinging on to someone or other Tory prime ministers clinging on to someone. I think it's actually quite a good sign that when you see Andrew Gwynn's comments, that there's no way this man can remain a Labour MP, and he's out before the ink is dried in the newspaper.
But steady, you can't have it both ways. You spent 4 years or however long Keir Starmer's been there in opposition, banging on about any time a Tory, and there was lots of opportunities for this, did something a bit like this, you would say this is evidence of the rottenness of the entire Tory establishment, and suddenly this one's now become just a bad guy and he's got rid of him. Problem solved.
No. It's a very important distinction to make here, because I talked to Keir Starmer a lot about this before the election. And of course you're going to get scandals in a Labour government. He knew that. He said the differences will be the way I respond.
No.
And he said you can say it in opposition, but people won't know it until they see it. And the speed with which he reacted last night, I think, says something about him.
I have to butt in on that one, because he said that, and then who was at the heart of one of the first sleazy kind of allegations? But he himself, wearing glasses every day, paid for by a Labour donor, wearing suits, paid for by a Labour donor.
Do you think there's moral equivalence with that and parties in Downing Street?
Having acting lessons on Christmas Eve. What was that about? Having acting lessons on Christmas Eve.
Working rather than vomiting up the walls.
That were actually in breach of COVID lockdown rules. My point is, you can't have it both ways. People in glass houses should not throw stones. He made his name off the back of throwing stones at people, and he's come in and he's just as vulnerable as anyone else.
That is a classic example of false equivalence.
OK, boys.
Two insiders and an observer. Here we have it, and that's a very good illustration.
OK, boys. Speaking of glass houses, let's talk about housing. That's a terrible segue, isn't it? But anyway, Matthew Pennycook has got to build 1.5 million houses. They have got a problem, which is that the numbers of people coming into the country, 2.2 million over the next parliamentary term, the aim of building more houses is to make people feel there's more supply, more availability, bring down rents, and so on. But if you've got more people packing into these new houses, it's not going to be felt, is it?
There is a problem of meeting targets as well. What is it, 300,000 a year need to be built?
Yeah, 1.5 million over the term.
So even if they were trying to meet their targets, that's a problem. You're right.
And by the way, we haven't met that 300,000 target since the 1970s, I think.
It hasn't been met yet, and the numbers will probably keep changing in the run-up to the end of the Parliament. Labour wants to talk about 1.5 million houses by the end of the Parliament, maybe not what they're going to build year by year. But you're right to point up the question about net migration, but also the fundamental point that we are relying on foreign workers, not just in the health service, but also in the building industry. So, without bringing in those workers, how on earth will Labour be able to meet that target? It takes a long, long time to train up a doctor. It also takes a lot of skill to get a skilled building worker. So, I think there's a real issue there.
This is a non-partisan point. I mean, Guto, Boris Johnson failed to do. In fact, Boris Johnson turbocharged it. We got up to 900,000 coming net migration. How do you solve this conundrum?
Spot on in the end. It depends what is the most important thing for you. And if you are the Reform Party, you think that you want to cut immigration come what may. If you believe in growth, then the truth is you need foreign workers because they are more willing to work, they're more qualified to work, they're more useful in so many sectors, whether it's care, which is quite low skill but really important, big hard, or in construction, or at the high end, the surgeons. And so you cannot simultaneously want better public services, reduce waiting lists, more houses, and actually have a massive, genuine clampdown on migration. You've got to make a choice there, and you've got to sell the choice that you make.
Tom, I'm going to come back to this because I'm going to talk to the Conservatives now. Tomorrow, their leader, Kemi Badenoch, will have been in post for 100 days. But with Reform still riding high in the polls, is she having any impact? Well, earlier I spoke to the Shadow Cabinet Office Minister, Alex Burghardt. Alex Burghardt, do the revelations about Andrew Gwynn not just bring the Labour Party into disrepute, but the whole of politics?
I think they do, actually, Trevor. I think that on one level, what we see here is just sort of quite a nasty attempt to do down an elderly person in Mr Gwynn's constituency, which sort of reflects the attitude that the Labour Party seems to have to elderly voters generally. You know, Labour lied to them about, you know, what they were going to do to winter fuel. They lied to them about sort of various things in the budget which affect them. And so, you know, not that surprised to see it. I think what's actually more sinister is that in one of Mr Gwynn's tweets, he refers to a constituent as being too Jewish. And that really does suggest that just beneath the surface, between all the sort of the window dressing that Keir Starmer's done, that with senior Labour politicians, there may still be a very serious problem with anti-Semitism, and I hope that the Prime Minister will get to grips with that immediately.
Well, to be fair, he has sacked the chap pretty instantly, which was not a feature of the Conservative Party's behaviour in government.
He sacked and suspended Mr Gwynn, right? But that was a big WhatsApp group with a lot of other Labour members on. Did any of them step in at the time? Did any of them call that out? That is a very serious remark. And if the Prime Minister doesn't take action against everyone in that group very quickly, we know that there is still a problem in the Labour Party.
Well, that is a matter for the Labour Party, and no doubt I and others will be talking to them about that. But I just really wanted to get your take on whether this adds to the sort of general cynicism about politicians, that they say one thing here in an interview publicly, but actually amongst themselves, they're sneering at
look, remarks like this don't do anyone any favours, right? And there's, you know, I hate the idea that people will look at that and think that's what all politicians think about voters. I know that that's not how, you know, the vast majority of MPs, you know, think about people in their constituencies. Okay. But yes, you know, but I say there's something much more serious at the heart of this, and I hope that Keir Starmer is going to get to grips with it.
All right, let's talk about your leader. She said this week that under a Conservative government, immigrants who claim benefits or use social housing would no longer be allowed to apply for indefinite leave to remain in the UK. So they get kicked out of the country.
Yep. So last year, Kemi made our first announcement on immigration, saying that new Conservative government would have a hard cap on the number of visas that could be issued every year.
By the way, what was that cap going to be?
Well, considerably, it depends on the circumstance at the time, but very, very considerably lower than we are now. What she said, what she said this week, which is a development of that, is that we have a lot of people coming through the immigration system at the moment who, after 5 years here, will be entitled to apply for indefinite leave to remain, and at that point, you run the risk of being on the path to citizenship. Citizenship, we think in the Conservative Party, is something extremely precious. It should never be given out lightly. It should be something that is valued by both the country and by the person receiving it. Yep. And so we're extending that process, saying that you have an extra 5 years until you get indefinite leave to remain, and then it would be an additional 5 years beyond that before you could apply for citizenship. And you'll probably have seen on the front page of Telegraph this morning, Trevor, that the Centre for Policy Studies has done a piece of work that has said without this, there is a potential £200 billion liability to the UK in terms of
we could get into a lengthy discussion about the validity of that number, but I just want to come back to a specific number. There's going to be a cap if there were a Conservative government. What would it be? Would it be in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or what?
Yeah, you know that we're not setting that out this time, but that we have said that it will be very, very considerably lower than where we are today. So we understand.
I'm puzzled when you guys do this. You say, I'm not going to tell you the number, but it's going to be a lot lower. How do you know it's going to be a lot lower if you don't have a number?
Because we currently have
and how do voters know?
We have an unprecedented surge. We will set that out nearer the time, but we have an unprecedented surge coming through the immigration system. Kemi's been clear that that's unacceptable, that it can't continue, and we're taking action whereas the Labour government is not.
All right. Look, one of the things that she said is that you want to remove those who are not net contributors.
Yeah, let's say
what
that
are
they
your
wouldn't...
criteria for net contribution to society?
Well, if you're taking more out of the system than you're putting in, let's say that if you're out of work, you're clearly in that situation. So we want people who, when they're here for the long term, they are contributing to the UK economy. Let's say that they're putting more in than they're taking out, and that's why we've said that we'll set out criteria that achieves that.
So the Conservative Party's view about contribution to society is that it's really all about money. If you are taking more in money than you are putting in, then you are not contributing. What does that say to a low-paid social care worker or a nurse?
If a UK citizen, entirely different.
Foreign. Most of the people in those categories are foreign.
We're saying that people who want to stay in this country long term should be making a net contribution to the country. I don't think that is unreasonable at all. Nobody has an automatic right to come and be part of the wonderful society that we have here in the UK. It's right that there are strict criteria, firstly on people who can come, secondly on people who can stay here long term, and thirdly on people who can be citizens.
2 weeks ago, your leader sat in that seat and said to me that she wouldn't be rushed into announcing new policies. Less than 2 weeks later, she's holding forth on how to get immigration numbers down. You're being panicked by polls showing reform ahead.
Absolutely not. You'll have heard, because I know you follow these things very closely, Trevor, you'll have heard what Kemi said at the outset.
I listen to every word you say.
I know you do. You're extremely attentive. And that's why you will have heard her say last year that, the vast bulk of our policy work requires incredibly deep thinking. But there are also
And then I heard her say last week, I'm going to give you a policy on something that I said 10 days ago I'm not going to give you a policy on.
So, no, that's not that. She never said that there wasn't going to be further policy on immigration.
She sat there and she said to me, I am not going to issue policies. There's 4 years to go. That's it. She sat there.
What she said when she first became leader was that it was clear that we would have to have policies in certain areas when the Labour Party was confronted with hard choices. So right now, if the Labour Party doesn't change its policy on immigration soon, there will be very, very large numbers of people who get indefinite leave to remain. If we don't speak out against that now, the Labour Party will miss that opportunity. We are going to make an amendment to the Borders and Security Bill tomorrow that the Labour Party will have to vote on. So it's not that we're not going to say anything for 4 years. It's just that there's a certain opportunity that you get from being in opposition, which means you get to do the deep thinking, which, quite frankly, Labour did not do when it was in opposition.
Some of your colleagues are now telling newspapers that it's time to start talking to Mr. Nigel Farage. And it's hard to see how you get back into power without either eliminating reform or doing a deal with them. Why not rip the plaster off, get talking to Mr. Farage? You can look at the numbers here. If Labour is as terrible as you keep telling me they are, it's your patriotic duty to get together with Nigel Farage, isn't it?
Well, my duty as a member of the Conservative Party is to try and get a Conservative government back at the end of this Parliament.
But you're never going to get that without a deal with Farage.
I'm not such a pessimist as you are, Trevor. I think that there is a lot.
I'm just dealing with objective evidence.
You said we're never going to do it, and I say, that's kind of that's a bit gloomy. There is a long, long way to go in this Parliament. You have 4 years. 4 years in which a lot of things are going to happen that we can't foresee, that you can't foresee, even you can't foresee, Trevor. I believe that we have in Kemi new leadership, someone who has the opportunity to be a real visionary, someone who has the opportunity to take the Conservative Party and the country into a very exciting direction, and also to those people who think there should be a deal with reform. Nigel Farage has said that his purpose is to destroy the Conservative Party. Now, that makes for a pretty difficult first date, doesn't it? So I don't, this is the sort of speculation that crops up when there's nothing else to write in the papers.
Let's just get this absolutely clear. let us suppose that Nigel Farage said, actually, when I said I want to destroy the Conservative Party, I don't mean destroy the Conservative Party. I want to work with the Conservative Party. And he said that at other times.
Yeah. I mean,
are you completely ruling out the possibility that the Conservative Party may reach an understanding, accommodation with reform?
Yeah, OK, well, let's extend my analogy a bit further. So you go on a first date and somebody says, I want to destroy you. And then slightly later in the first date, they say, oh, no, forget what I said at the start. Okay. I mean, this is... No, look, come on. This is not...
Are we talking no deal ever?
This is not a sort of...
You're not saying there's no deal ever?
This is not a sensible conversation, Trevor. The fact
it's a conversation some of your colleagues are having.
The fact is that at the moment, there's one party that has said that it wants to completely take us out. We are on a mission to try and get a Conservative majority at the next election, and that's what we're going to do under Kemi.
What's lovely about this is that you are going a million miles round the answer to the simple question, would you rule out any deal with reform ever?
That is not a question for me, Trevor. I'm not that important. I don't get to make that call. But what I can tell you is that we have in Kemi someone who I think can get us a Conservative majority at the next election, and that's what I'd rather have.
Alex Burghardt, thank you so much for your time this morning. Back to our panel, Tom Baldwin, Carolyn Quinn and Guto Harry. We will come to the not that important Mr Burghardt in a second, but Tom, you just wanted to make a point on immigration from our last discussion.
Well, I mean, I was just watching that interview. I think it was almost the sort of latest contribution to a long-standing infantile debate on immigration in this country. I mean, we've had not your interview, but the Conservative policy. Look, you know, we're now more than 8 years on from Brexit referendum, which we were told was all about immigration and taking control of our borders and all that stuff. Since then, immigration has quadrupled, and we need at some point to have a grown-up conversation in this country about immigration, about what kind of skills we need. Do we want, you know, the Polish plumber who used to come here, family staying in Poland, to build our houses? Or do we want people coming here with 4 or 5 dependents, which is what we've been having? And this is the kind of, you know, we're getting consequences, really dangerous consequences from a very, very silly debate.
You couldn't possibly insult me on this question, because I think pretty much everybody agrees. Everybody comes into this studio and says we need a sensible, grown-up debate about immigration, and then we go back to the House of Commons and we get not that. But let's just talk for the... We'll come back to this, but let's just talk about what Alex Burghardt has been saying about the relationship with reform, Guto. 100 days tomorrow for Kemi Badenoch. Tories are sinking in the polls. They are third. They've got to talk to reform, haven't they?
There'll be a very real question about this far sooner than the next election, because I think in my native Wales next year, when there's elections to the Welsh Senedd, I think reform are going to do extremely well under a very proportional system that gives you as many seats as you get votes, essentially. And if the Conservatives in Wales hold their own, there will be the potential in Wales, for the first time since devolution, to take Labour out of power. And that is the million-dollar question then to the Tories. Are the Tories prepared to do a deal with reform, who may be not the junior partner in that, but the senior partner? And so this will be very real in a year's time. For now, the issue for me is that the Conservative Party is, whether you like it or not, arguably the most successful party in the history of democratic politics in terms of its ability to reinvent itself and win power. And it's done that traditionally, as people like me see it, when it's gone for the mainstream, when it's been there at the centre of British politics. And what I regret at the moment is the leadership seems to be drifting towards the fringes of British politics at the very time when a person called Nigel Farage, of all people, is talking about not being the Tea Party, when he is brave enough to stand up to Elon Musk and say, no, Tommy Robinson is not me. So Nigel Farage is clearly eyeing the centre of British politics. And if they manage to sort of swap places on that one, it'll be a bad day for the Conservative Party and actually a major breakthrough for reform.
And you talk about next year and the elections in Wales, but of course, although some council elections are being postponed in May, there will still be a moment of test for the Conservatives because they are defending over 900 seats. Reform are only defending about 4 seats at these council elections. So Reform will be able to proclaim that they've done very well, and for some Conservatives it may be a very difficult moment. It's interesting, Alex Burkhardt sort of almost relieved that he doesn't have to make that decision about whether to talk to Reform, although there are clearly some in his party and in the ranks who are weighing up their chances and wondering whether the moment to move over is coming, or at least to talk.
Well, indeed. Actually, I think that there's a council in Kent, I think it's Medway, where this week a number of Conservative councillors crossed to Reform, and I think Reform is now in control of that council. You observed these people over a long time, Carolyn. Can you smell any panic?
I think the announcement on the immigration policy, as you were pointing out, I think there was an element of panic in that because there was a sense before that Kemi Badenoch was weighing up, was thinking that it was going to be more about vibe than actual policy. Suddenly, a policy comes out and it's instantly picked apart because it doesn't seem to have been properly thought through before being announced. So I think there is a panic about that. There's a panic about Reform standing on the sidelines and almost chuckling over what's happening within the Conservative Party. So there'll be a lot of deep thinking about this.
All right, well, let's take a slight detour from the conventional politics. The former Conservative MP, Jack Lopresti, lost his seat at the last election. It's nothing unusual there, lots of his colleagues did. So what next? Many go into business. They plan for a return one day, or they just nurse a bruised ego. But Jack Lopresti went to Ukraine. He joined up with the armed forces there to fight Putin's invasion. And no doubt he drew on his own military background. And he joins me now live from Kyiv. Good morning, Mr. Lopresti.
Good morning. It's Jack.
Jack.
Thanks.
What made you do this?
Well, the last time I spoke in the House of Commons, I said that the defence of the UK began in Ukraine. And I've been coming here for 2 years now, regularly, helping with charities, doing work with defence manufacturers in my own previous constituency. And about a year ago, I thought to myself, well, you know, politics looks difficult for us as a party at the moment, to say the least. And if I were not re-elected, then I'd come out here and do whatever I could to help. And I knew in the back of my mind I'd more than likely end up in the military, which is where I am.
How close to the front line are you, by the way?
Well, at the moment, I'm sat in Kyiv. Last week, I went to Poltava and Kharkiv. So my job, I do travel around a bit. I went to the front line, actually, when I was still a member of parliament about 18 months ago at Zaporizhzhia to see British kit and equipment being used, which was a very proud moment for me.
Lots of people will be very curious about this. Most people would be anxious about doing something like this, never mind somebody who's been in public life in the way you have been. Can I be direct about this? Is this in some way an emotional reaction to losing your seat?
No, because as I say, it was something, I've been coming here for 2 years, and about a year ago, I knew I'd probably end up in this position, and I feel very privileged that I'm able to do what I can to help. And what you need, with respect, what people need to remember is that the Ukrainians are not only fighting for their own survival, their own freedom, their right to exist as an independent nation. This is also our battle, which is why we've done so much to help in training and military equipment. We know what Putin wants, which is the restoration of the Russian Empire. This war started over 10 years ago with the annexation of Crimea. And if Ukraine falls, if we fail here, then we know he won't stop. So, this is a battle for Europe. And if Putin succeeds, it's a green light for dictators everywhere, and we'll all be in it.
It is obviously existential for the Ukrainians, but we see this through television pictures and at a distance. Talk to us about what it actually feels like to be there. What's the morale of your fellow soldiers and so on?
Well, the morale of the Ukrainian people, to begin with, is incredible. I mean, they've had so much to deal with in the last 3 years, or perhaps back to 2014. and they're still willing to fight and sacrifice to free their land and remain a free and independent people. And it's astonishing and inspirational that they're still willing to fight. Fellow soldiers, yes, they're very grateful of the support the UK and some of our European allies and the US are giving, and they're still very much in the fight, and they know they have to win.
You say they're still very much in fighting, that they're fighting to free their land, but realistically, is the fight here now to win, or is it simply to put Ukraine in a position that is essentially the best possible position from which to negotiate a peace?
Well, I'm not sure what negotiation will mean when Mr. Putin, President Zelensky said yesterday that Putin's mobilizing, increasing his armed forces by 100,000. He's linked up with North Korea, with China, with elements of Iran to increase his industrial and his military capacity. I don't know what negotiation means. I don't think you can negotiate away an invasion, war crimes, atrocities. The Ukrainians know they have to win to remain a free, independent, sovereign nation.
It's coming up on 3 years now. How long do you think that the people that you are fighting next to are going to tolerate this and continue fighting?
Well, as long as it takes, because the alternative will be catastrophic for Ukraine and for the rest of the world. I volunteered and I will stay here for as long as I'm needed, and I'll do whatever I'm asked to do and whatever I'm needed to the best of my ability. And that's pretty much the feeling amongst the military and amongst the civilians here.
Tell me a bit about your own feelings about this. I know that you're doing...
Sorry, I missed that. I missed that, sorry.
I was asking if you could talk a little bit about your own feelings at the moment. I know that some of the time you're doing organisational work, you're doing procurement and so on, but some of the time you are clearly in the danger zone. What essentially motivates you to risk your life? I understand the grand point about freedom and so forth, but why you, and what's driving you there?
I feel very privileged that I'm able to come here and help and serve and volunteer. So I feel incredibly privileged and honoured for that. You mentioned my military experience. It was very modest and quite a while ago, so that wasn't in my thinking. But obviously, I've done an operational tour before and I know the basics. But
you were in Afghanistan, I think.
Yeah, this is our fight. I cannot reiterate that enough, really. If Ukraine falls, then we know what comes next. Estonia, Poland, Lithuania, a war with NATO. Perhaps the Chinese will look and say, actually, these guys won't fight, so we'll move on to Taiwan. This is a must win. And that's what I'm motivated by.
Jack Lopresti, thank you very much for your time this morning. Stay as safe as you can. And thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Next, I'll be joined by Catherine Burblesing as the woman called Britain's strictest head teacher launches a blistering attack on the Education Secretary.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
It felt akin to riding into some sort of Armageddon.
Many other areas have been hit badly. There are shells coming in every few minutes.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Oh.
getting up close and personal with a rhino.
This is what makes the job so fantastic.
We're going to do this 100 times every day for the next 3 months.
Why have we agreed to this?
Raises many questions about many things.
Actually seeing people impacted. She was so upset.
It was powerful. They kind of couldn't believe they were being berated here.
Very much on my terms, I think was the subtext. News happens fast around Donald Trump.
It was a kind of wow moment.
Yeah, that's what it feels like, doesn't it?
It's Trump world, and we just live in it.
So, where next?
Follow Trump 100 wherever you get your podcasts.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. Greg Milam, Sky News, Manchester.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over. People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks. I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
Catherine Berbelsing runs an extraordinarily successful school in North London, and she's become famous for her focus on discipline and rigorous standards. She's often called Britain's strictest head teacher, with many fans, especially on the right of politics. This week, she launched a blistering attack on the Education Secretary, saying she had a Marxist ideological dislike of academies and was unable to answer questions about her schools bill when they met. The Education Department said it would not comment on a private meeting held in good faith and welcomed a range of views in a debate about policy. Well, Catherine Berbelsing is with me now. You met the Education Secretary last Monday and you came out calling her an extreme Marxist. It's a bit strong, isn't it?
Well, she wants to centralise power in the state, so that's what I mean by being a Marxist. The changes she's making make no sense, are not needed, and will destroy the chances of poor children in the system, and also take away the freedoms that currently school leaders have in academies to give a bespoke and tailored approach to their community. And it will be returned, those freedoms are returned to the central state. So the power then is with the state rather than with the leaders, and there aren't many freedoms. Freedoms to tailor your curriculum according to what your children might need, the freedom to be able to hire from different routes in terms of recruitment. You know, there aren't that many, but she wants to take them away.
Well, let me put what I suppose might be the alternative view, that there is a case for ensuring that resources and pupils are distributed evenly and fairly between schools in an area, rather than just leaving it to the principle of every man for himself, devil take the hindmost. And also, when it comes to a curriculum, making sure that every child everywhere at least has a basic
I
set of
100%
skills.
agree. So she keeps talking about, the Education Secretary talks about a floor, it's a floor, not a ceiling. And I said to her, so, OK, name me one school in the country that does not offer a floor of a core curriculum to its pupils. She couldn't name a single school because it doesn't exist. The other thing I said was, what would you say to a mum who's desperate to get her child into a good school, and the places at that good school have been reduced thanks to Clause 50 in this bill, and we've increased the places at the other school that the parent doesn't want their child to go to, but now there are no places in the school that you want your child to go to because the good schools simply have fewer places, which means the good schools have less money, fewer teachers. What do you say to her? She was unable to respond.
Well, you say, by the way, that name me a school where this doesn't take place. It is true that there are schools which don't bother to teach these, and you'll know in a past life, one of the things that I had to do was to regulate institutions for religious practice, and there's some religious schools which didn't bother that much about reading and writing, and some of them had to be actually prosecuted. So it is possible in this country for schools not to do some of the basics.
No, that's not true. They're all doing English and maths and science.
Well, I know it's true because we took them to court.
And because they weren't teaching English.
Well,
and
some of the basic curriculums.
So they weren't.
The point here is that it is the case that central government or local authorities do have some responsibilities to make sure that some basics.
Of course, you're talking about a religious issue where, quite rightly, schools were abusive of what their religious status. That's a different point.
Okay.
That's not to do with the curriculum. Now, but there are other issues. There's the PAN that I just spoke about. That they will be able, the central state will be able to reduce the number of places in good schools. Okay. There are issues around uniform, where school leaders. The number one piece of advice I give school leaders when they're trying to improve their failing school is to address the uniform. Broken windows theory, it would take me a long time to go into it.
I understand that.
But the fact is, it's the number one way in which you turn around a failing school.
All right.
Schools will not be able to do that if this bill goes through.
I don't want to reduce this to a personality thing, but you've obviously had this clash with the Education Secretary. A couple of points. It's not that awful to be a Marxist. You were once one yourself. But whatever you think of her policies, she has been elected. Is it reasonable for you to essentially call her names?
No, I'm just describing her. I'm saying she's a Marxist because that's the explanation for wanting to centralise the state.
She says that she says she's not. I mean, you read an account of
it depends on how you describe a Marxist. I mean, I'm saying she's centralising powers into the state and that those freedoms should be left with the academy.
But you know the point here, Sue. You read an account of a private meeting with her in which you said she didn't understand her own bill, she's an extremist.
Hang on. I don't know
let me finish what I was going to say. She said that you kept interrupting her and you didn't give her a chance to explain.
No. What I did was every time she tried to fob me off, first of all, it wasn't private. There were 3 other people with her. There was my deputy with me. And they kept staring at us and being horrible and huffing and puffing and all kinds of things and trying to intimidate us. And they didn't give us any water to drink. I don't think
anybody thinks they can intimidate you, Catherine.
Oh, no, they were doing that very, very well. And it was very uncomfortable. And we were, so I was asking questions. As soon as she would try and fob me off with politicians speak, I would move to my next question. And I kept moving to my next question.
Well, I can say from personal experience in this show, that sounds to some people like interrupting them.
Oh, yeah, no, I did interrupt her. I agree. I interrupted her. And perhaps I deserve a bit of a detention for that. But the fact is, I am David here trying to fight Goliath, and I want to hold her to account. And I'm not going to get fobbed off by platitudes and politician speak where she's not really answering my questions, which is exactly what was happening.
OK, I'm not having you take over this seat. You've got great self-confidence about all of this. And you say in your letter that the government should be listening to practitioners, to teachers, heads, and so on. But you're not the only practitioner in this. And pretty much every teaching union, including your fellow head teachers, broadly back her and criticise you.
But that's not true.
Is it the case that everyone who disagrees with you is just a bit stupid?
No. What you're saying isn't true. School leaders across the country are up in arms about it. It is
They're
the fact
representatives.
Well, no. They are very worried about this bill. Loads of school leaders are worried about this bill. Some have spoken out. Many people are awkward and don't want to because they don't want to get themselves into trouble, which is understandable. Look, there are over 100, there are just about 100, almost 100 schools that got over +1 on progress aid. Excellent schools in this
That is a
country.
measure of
Now,
how much a child has improved between year 7 and year 11.
That's right. Now, you would have expected the Secretary of State to have gone to visit one of these schools. She hasn't been to visit one of them. I asked her in the meeting. She was unable to name one. Then yesterday, somebody sent me an FOI they'd done of the schools that she's visited. She hasn't visited a single one of those nearly 100 schools that have got a +1 on their progress aid. Now, the fact is, I think it's just incumbent on the Secretary of State to be visiting excellent schools and learning from those school leaders who are all very worried about this bill.
Well, we asked the Department for Education what their response was. They said they wouldn't give you, they wouldn't comment on a private meeting. Just very briefly, Catherine, is there a thing here about your school, which is obviously very special? But one thing that's interesting is 99% are ethnic minorities, and they're ethnic minorities who, everywhere in the country, tend to overperform Indian heritage children, African heritage children. Actually, your methods might work for them, but maybe they won't work in Jaywick or Chesterley Street or somewhere else.
We've got very few Indian pupils, actually. We've got a whole variety of pupils at Michaela. But ignore Michaela. This isn't about Michaela. This is, for instance, about Clause 44, where failing schools will no longer be automatically turned into academies, which means that trusts will not be able, that have the reputation of turning around failing schools, they will not be able to get in there and turn around that failing school in time for those children who are there for their education to be saved.
Catherine Birbalsingh, thank you so very much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we'll hear from the Bishop of London, Dame Sarah Mullally.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
When the Church of England's top brass gathers for their annual synod next week, leading the agenda will be how to address its safeguarding crisis. As Bishop of London, Dame Sarah Mullally is one of the Church's most senior figures. She's now speaking for the first time since Justin Welby's resignation, telling this programme that some in the Church aren't aware of their own power and that she's not sure the Church will pick a woman as its next Archbishop. I spoke to her earlier this week. Bishop Sarah, you've been silent on the resignations of Archbishop of Canterbury, Bishop of Liverpool, allegations of bullying and cover-up thus far. Why are you speaking out now?
Well, I haven't been silent on those issues. I've been working within the church. You know, I'm the sort of person that rolls my sleeves up and tries to move forward. But what I recognise is that the last 3 or 4 months it has become apparent to people the shocking abuse within the church, and my heart goes out to the victims and to the survivors. And I'm very conscious of, one, the bravery of them coming forward, but also the shocking abuse that that occurred to them, and the way in which the church failed to address it properly. And it means that we all have to, in terms of apologising to them, we have to do something. And next week is the meeting of Synod, and there are some very clear proposals coming around independence of safeguarding, around reforms in clergy conduct measure, and around our governance. And actually, therefore, Synod has to take this seriously. If we're apologising, which we should do, for the abuse that has occurred, we then need to take action to ensure that it doesn't occur again.
I want to come to the issue of what action in a moment, but do you accept that, in the words of the Archbishop of York, the public is disgusted by the Church's failures? It's a strong word, disgusted.
It is strong, but it's appropriate. I think it is horrific, the abuse that some people have had to endure within the Church, and the way in which the Church has not responded correctly to it. And I think people reading it will be disgusted and horrified. And therefore, we have to take that very seriously. And I think that their reaction has to shape the way in which we respond to it. And safeguarding procedures, culture and practice has improved, but it does need a step change. And I think that is what I think that we need to do to restore trust in the Church.
What, in your view, is it about the Church's culture that allowed these repeated failures of safeguarding?
I think historically there has been a culture where I don't think that people have always been aware of their own power. I don't think there has been always transparency. I think there hasn't historically been good procedures around safeguarding. And I also think that accountability is not always clear. We have seen improvement in safeguarding practices, and the proposals coming to Synod about independence is the next step in that. But also I think it's very hard around accountability. In the NHS or the civil service, it's very clear who I was accountable to and what for, and what would the HR sort of processes for dealing with things when they went wrong. And I think in the Church, whilst I swear an oath of canonical obedience, where I part of common tenure, they're not strong enough to hold us to account. And therefore, I think along with the improvement in safeguarding, we do have to take seriously accountability, ensuring that these terrible things will not occur again.
But do you fear that there are still people within the Church who present safeguarding issues, that it isn't just a matter of a few bad people, but there may be people who are still doing the things that you describe as shocking, that Archbishop of York described as disgusting?
I can't guarantee that there aren't, but what I do know is that our safeguarding procedures and structures have greatly improved over the last 10 years. So we have really high qualified safeguarding teams within each diocese. There are parish safeguarding officers in every church, and they work very hard to ensure that the environment in which they are in is safe. And if risks arise, that they are dealt with properly and appropriately. And I do believe that there is no doubt in my mind, we have improved. The proposals at Synod around independent safeguarding is really there to say that taking the advice of the J report to say that those professionals and the structures and scrutiny needs to become independent. And that is building on what we have already done within the church. So I am confident that structures and processes, cultures are better. But it is something I can't guarantee around what is happening in the thousands of churches across this country. But I do believe it is better, and they will pick it up much quicker and manage risks that are there.
Let's talk about the other point you made, which is about accountability. I was very struck by a phrase in your article for the Church Times. You said, "A sword pierces my soul when I reflect on my part. What have I failed to do to prevent this hurt?" Where did you fail?
Well, I think that, I am the sort of person coming into the church as I did, having had a sort of another life before, to share my learning and my reflections around a whole series of things, but also safeguarding, and very much rolling up my sleeves to try and improve our structures, our culture. But what is clear is that we still see that the church continues to fail in both disclosure, in managing disclosures and supporting people. And therefore there is no doubt I have to self-reflect and say, well, where did I not, where was my omission in what I did and what I could have done better in that way? And I think that's where to be part of a church to which I believe I'm called to see the way in which it has hurt and continues to hurt people, is a great sorrow for me. And I recognise the hurt that we've caused victims and survivors, and I'm sorry. And the sense of which recognise your failure means that you then have to say, well, where could we do more? So whilst I think the proposals going to Synod begin to move on that way, I think there is more that we could do. It's not just our safeguarding structures, it is our HR structures. It's also around how we're governed. We are still very slow at making decisions and making change. We do have to do more, and we have to do better.
But the reason I was struck by this is that it's such, if I can put it this way, a contrast to what the former Archbishop of Canterbury said in the House of Lords when he spoke of the institutional and personal responsibility in a way that, to most people, felt a little bit like saying, well, I might have been there, but I wasn't particularly involved. By contrast, you said that you bear some personal responsibility.
Well, I feel I do. I am a bishop in the Church of England. I have a cure of souls for example, the Diocese of London, but also a wider role in the House. And I think that we have seen improvements. But as I said, I think we can go further and we can go faster. And so therefore, I will play my part in the synod that's coming next week to make sure that we do pass the motions that relate to independence and the clergy conduct measure. But I also think we have to go further.
All right, well, look, a big signal will be who becomes the next Archbishop of Canterbury. Unless you want to tell me that you're going to be a candidate. Let's come back to that. But look, the question that some people will ask is it time for a woman to be the Archbishop of Canterbury?
Well, to answer your first question, I'm not going to be the Archbishop of Canterbury, and there is a process that is set up to look for the next Archbishop of Canterbury, and you and other people can take part in that process. But I think what we have to be clear about is that...
When you say you're not going to be, is that because you don't want to be, or because you think the Church wouldn't accept a woman?
Well, there is a process set up to look at for the next Archbishop of Canterbury. I think it is entirely possible that there may be women in that shortlist. Whether the Church of England will appoint a woman, I am not sure about. But I think what we also have to recognise is that resolving the situation that we're in at the moment, the improvement of safeguarding in our culture, is not down to one person or the Archbishop of Canterbury. That we have to all play our part. So even with a new Archbishop of Canterbury, they will need our support, the support of the House of Bishops, the support of Synod, to bring about the change that we're looking for.
Sarah Mullally, Bishop of London, thank you. In just a moment, we'll hear once again from our panel.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran?
No, no, no.
Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing. As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News. I want to be treated equally like everyone else. It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
The Premier League is exclusively on Peacock. Two of the league's biggest clubs find themselves at the wrong end of the table.
And the mood turns extremely sour.
Desperately chasing a win to turn their season around.
It's a beautiful finish.
Tottenham Hotspur.
To Eriksen. Back towards Amma.
Manchester United. This is the Premier League. February 16, only on Peacock.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
Back to our panel, Tom Baldwin, Carolyn Quinn, Guto Harry. Carolyn, in spite of the slight thick of it moment there with Sarah Mullally, material points you
make news there.
Possibly.
And then
what I thought was rather interesting was that she was pretty clear. She's the most senior woman I think in the Anglican Communion worldwide, and she's saying pretty clearly she does not think that the Anglican Communion is ready for a female leader.
Yeah, and I think she's probably right in that. What I find depressing about stories like this is it just feels like yet another institution that is being dragged kicking and screaming into not necessarily reform, because who knows, it might happen again, but at least some accountability for what's gone on within the ranks.
The point she made.
You know, it just feels like it happens over and over again, with loyalty to the institution being greater than loyalty to the people within it. I mean, it might make a difference eventually in years to come if a woman were to take over, but I don't think many people hold out much hope that that will happen at this point in time.
It's a rather interesting point, because we've seen it in broadcasting organisations, not to be mentioned. We've seen it in political parties, that there is a tension between defending the institution that you're in and that gives you your livelihood or your identity or whatever it is, and what people in it might do to others outside it.
That's what Keir Starmer would call putting party before country. You know, this idea that you're just there to defend your party's interests rather than do the right thing for the country. I think there's a bigger issue with the Church of England, because I think sort of less than 1% of people taking the Anglican communion worldwide now are in England. And I think the Church of England is struggling to sort of balance, or the Anglicans in Africa with the Anglicans in the UK and the Episcopalians in America. And it's struggling for relevance. You know, in 21st century England, there should be gay marriages in Church of England churches. There should be, we shouldn't be having a debate about whether the Church of England is ready for a female Archbishop of Canterbury. The problem is that, there are very, very different social attitudes across the Anglican communion worldwide.
Guto, Catherine Birbalsingh, who is the sort of becoming the Joan of Arc of the right, has got herself into a fight with Bridget Phillipson. Where are you on this?
I think they're quite evenly matched, because Bridget is one of the best communicators in the cabinet, I think, but in a sort of very bulldozy kind of way. And, I'd love to see both of them on your set. I think I'm with her to the extent that she says when she called her a Marxist, she was not trying to use it as a pejorative word. She was trying to say somebody who
we've all been there.
In more power for the state rather than more power for devolved organisations, in this case schools, defines you politically. And I think she's got a point on that. And there is a sort of controlling instinct here. I'm not so worried, not so well informed on this schools bill. But for instance, yesterday, new announcements about what academic research should do in terms of diversity inclusion. I think those sort of diktats are really quite damaging, and the motivation for them is quite damaging, and it could undermine economic growth, it could undermine academic excellence. And I'm weary of these things, and therefore you need people who are prepared to sort of call them out.
All right, let's talk about the politics. Let's go to the vulgar issue of voting and opinions. And what we are seeing is pretty remarkable, really, isn't it? That a third party... We've often seen third parties coming up in the polls. But what is interesting about this, I think, is that Reform, of course, is neck and neck with Labour and Tories, but the Labour and Tory parties together are polling lower than they have been probably in my adult lifetime. It's a rejection of conventional politics that we're seeing right across the Western world.
Well, we are seeing that, but you also do see a lot of this happening in between elections. Nigel Farage has threatened this again and again and again, and at the end of this sort of 15-year period, when he's had profound influence on other parties, he remains leader of a party with 4 MPs in Parliament. I do think there's a danger for the Labour Party in focusing entirely on the threat from reform. Yes, there is a threat from reform, but there's also a threat on the other flank. There's a piece by Rob Ford in The Observer today saying that more Labour voters, I think, are switching to the Greens or the Liberal Democrats or the SNP than to reform. So Labour are fighting on 2 flanks at the moment. And just as Labour was wrong, I think, to take the votes of white working class people, its traditional heartlands for granted in the 90s and noughties, I think it'd be making a mistake now to be taking the votes of graduate middle class voters for granted in the 2020s.
This is a striking thing, and you're right. I mean, we're now between the Labour and Tories, they're about 45% together, and that's really unusual, even in periods where third parties have come up. Are we now heading into a 3, 4, 5-party system? I mean, in Wales, there's an extra party, Scotland, another, the SNP.
Yeah, and there's PR in those two countries, in Wales and Scotland, which actually consolidates any sort of tendency to move towards another party. And if we had PR at Westminster, Nigel Farage would be a major force in Westminster, not just actually with 4 seats. And, what that does to your view of PR is interesting, because instinctively I think it's a good idea, but I don't want to see, more of them in there. I think what it does say is that, yes, back to the conversation we were having about the Church of England, every institution needs to sort out the bad people, the incompetent people, the underwhelming people, but that's a necessary and not sufficient condition. What we've ended up with are really uninspiring people leading a lot of institutions, including the 2 main political parties in Britain, frankly. And Nigel Farage does well, not because I think every Brit suddenly out there sort of knows everything about the reform agenda and they sort of sign up to this. Have you heard what they want to do about, economic competence? They just have a charismatic politician who talks to them more engagingly.
And it's certainly the case that Labour MPs in red wall seats are very aware of the reform threat. And they are saying to Keir Starmer, look, unless we address the concerns of those voters that we've won over to us, who voted Brexit in the past, who voted Conservative in the past, and if we don't address concerns that they have over immigration, over access to a GP, over housing, we are going to lose votes to reform.
Well, Mr Farage is clearly making the weather. I'll be back next Sunday.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.